Marvel, I inherited the Shadow Realm. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101, The Real Mandarin and Killian. Blood spurted out from the neck, and the Eagle Countryman's head was cut off. Everyone packed up their things and prepared to retreat. But at this moment, a phone rang on the Eagle Countryman's body. At that moment, everyone who was preparing to evacuate paused, and the hoarse voice of the man on the screen suddenly sounded. "Answer the phone." "Yes, boss." The strong man holding the screen responded, stepped forward and took out the phone from the body, and answered the call. "Why did you take so long to answer the phone? Also, what did you do when I asked you to do it?" The live broadcast was interrupted halfway. "Where are you? Speak." A gloomy voice kept coming from the phone, and the tone was full of anger, which showed the anger of the person on the other end. "He's dead." At this time, a hoarse voice sounded on the screen, and the other end of the phone suddenly became quiet. For a while, an atmosphere of silence enveloped the air, making people extremely depressed. After more than 10 seconds, the voice on the other end of the phone sounded again. "Who are you? How did he die?" After the words fell, a contemptuous laugh sounded on the screen. "You had someone impersonate me, but you didn't even know who I was. As for him, I had someone kill him. You are the Mandarin." The voice on the other end of the phone seemed very surprised, but before he could continue, he was interrupted by the voice on the screen. "I prefer people to call me the Mandarin." "Sorry, Mandarin." The person on the other end of the phone decisively gave in. "Let me introduce myself. My name is Killian. I'm sorry for having someone impersonate you. The reason I did this was just to borrow your reputation, to complete some of my plans. I originally wanted to cooperate with you, but I just couldn't find you. Now we actually meet by coincidence. It's fate. I wonder if the Mandarin is interested in participating in my plan." Killian said sincerely, praising the other party very much. The Mandarin said non-committally, "Why should I cooperate with you? Because we have the same enemy, Tony Stark. He is not my enemy, just my prey." The Mandarin said disdainfully. Killian was choked by this, and didn't know how to speak for a while. However, he was also a man, and he quickly reorganized his words. "Whether it's prey or enemy, we have the same goal, so there is a basis for cooperation. What do you think? Besides, my plan is not only Stark, but also the entire United States. As long as the plan succeeds, the world's most powerful country will eventually be controlled by us." Killian's eloquence is not good, but his words did arouse the interest of the Mandarin. Controlling the United States, this kind of thing is undoubtedly full of temptation for the Mandarin. At this moment, his tone is no longer casual, but has become much more serious. "Tell me more specifically." After the words fell, Killian on the other end of the phone smiled. An hour later, all the strong men evacuated the manor, and then a fire directly engulfed the entire manor. In the next 24 hours, militants from all over the world rushed to the United States under a mysterious order. The next day, the worst terrorist attack in history broke out in the United States. In just one day, the country suffered hundreds of terrorist attacks. A large number of people died in the attack, and countless economic and property losses. Soon, someone discovered that the place that was attacked was the same place that was announced in the absurd live broadcast yesterday. For a time, the whole country was in a panic. Just as the American society was in a panic, a handsome middle-aged man walked into a certain official residence in Washington Shield. Ding dong. The doorbell rang, and the nanny opened the door and looked at the middle-aged man with a trace of vigilance on her face. "Who are you looking for?" After saying that, the middle-aged man smiled and said, "Don't be nervous. My name is Killian. I'm looking for Mr. Carls. I have an appointment with him." "Then wait a moment, I'll go and inform him." "Okay." Killian nodded. Seeing him so cooperative, the vigilance on the nanny's face dissipated a lot. Soon, the nanny appeared at the door again. "Mr. Carls asked you to go in. He is waiting for you in the study on the second floor." "Thank you." After thanking him, Killian walked into the mansion calmly. The mansion was inhabited by one of the most powerful people in the United States. Ordinary people would be very cautious when entering it, but Killian was just like strolling in his own backyard, looking around without any restraint. Soon, Killian went up to the second floor and found the study. Without knocking, Killian pushed the door open and walked in. In the study, a white old man was sitting at the desk. He frowned at Killian, who pushed the door open and walked in. He didn't say much. Instead, he pointed to the sofa opposite and said, "Sit down." "Thank you." Sitting down leisurely, Killian looked at Carls and smiled. "I usually see you on TV. It's a bit unreal to see you in person now." Hearing this, Carls didn't respond, but directly said, "You said you can make my daughter's legs grow out. Is it true or not?" Hearing this, Killian leaned back, raised a smile at the corner of his mouth and said, "Haven't you seen the video? If it's fake, I don't think I can sit opposite you." Killian said bluntly, and there was not much respect for Carls in his words. This is also the reason why Carls kept frowning. He didn't like the guy in front of him. If he couldn't heal his daughter's legs, he would have had him kicked out long ago. "Okay, tell me your conditions. As long as you can cure my daughter, I will agree to any conditions." "Really?" Killian smiled strangely. "What if I ask you to cooperate with me to kidnap the president?" Swish. Carl stood up from his seat in an instant, looking at Killian in shock. "What are you talking about?" I said, "What if I ask you to cooperate with me to kidnap the president?" Killian repeated what he had just said word by word, making Carl realize that the guy in front of him was really not joking. He was serious. "Impossible. Don't even think about it." Carl refused sternly, his face full of anger. Looking at his appearance, Killian once again resumed his leisurely appearance. "Nothing is impossible. Everything has a price. As long as the price is high, nothing is impossible. Think about your daughter, who has been lying in bed for all these years. How long do you plan to let her live like this, a life worse than death? Guess, what would she think if she knew that her father once had the chance to save her, but gave up in the end? Besides, kidnapping the president is not a bad thing for you. If he goes down, won't you go up?" Killian kept talking, and at this moment his words were like the temptation of the devil, making Carl's face change again and again. Chapter 102. 2 consecutive kidnapping incidents. The depressing atmosphere filled the entire study, and Carl's face kept changing. At this moment, two villains seemed to appear in his mind. One said that he would agree to it, and the other said that he could not agree to it. As time passed, the villain who clamored to agree to it gradually gained the upper hand. In the end, Carl smiled helplessly. "Okay, you convinced me. You are a devil." "No, I just help you make a choice," Killian said with a smile. After that, the two talked about some details, and Killian said goodbye and left. Looking at Killian's leaving figure, Carls walked into the room on the second floor with an expressionless face. A lovely girl was lying on the bed, like a sleeping beauty. But unfortunately, she was missing a leg, as if a crack appeared on the body of a delicate porcelain doll, which was a pity. Cal stared at his daughter quietly, without saying a word, and left the room after a long time. On the other side, Killian got into the car, after leaving the official residence, and made a phone call directly. "Mandarin, the plan went smoothly, and we can start the action next. However, you need to do me a small favor, and help me kidnap someone." "Who?" The Mandarin's voice was as hoarse as ever, as if his throat had been burned by fire. "Virginia Potts." "Okay." Without any nonsense, the Mandarin agreed, and hung up the phone. Listening to the busy tone on the phone, Killian threw the phone aside, looked at himself in the rearview mirror, and smiled and said, "Tony, you didn't expect that we will meet soon." After that, Killian started the car, and left the place quickly. While Killian was planning everything, Tony on the other side knew nothing about the upcoming danger. Audience, the man with the most power in the United States, has to deal with many things every day. Although he has a group of secretaries to help him, the workload is not easy at all. Today, he was busy until late at night as usual, and then he left the White House and returned to his official residence surrounded by bodyguards. The night enveloped Washington Shield. Looking at the night view, his mind was still thinking about the various things he had dealt with today. Suddenly, an explosion sounded, and the vehicle at the front of the convoy was directly hit by a rocket, which exploded and turned into a ball of fire in the dark. The sudden change made Orleans' expression change, and his bodyguard team reacted instantly, quickly got out of the car to build a defense line, and called for help. Da. Fierce gunshots came from both sides of the street, and one armed man rushed out of the darkness and rushed towards Orleans' convoy. Although his bodyguard team quickly launched a counterattack, their counterattack seemed so weak in the face of this premeditated attack. In just a few minutes, Orleans' bodyguard team was all killed, and the fierce gunfire stopped. Orleans, who had escaped the disaster by curling up in the car, had no time to react to what was going on. With a burst of violent destruction, the car door was opened directly, and a fully armed bearded man appeared in front of him. "Look, who we caught, the head of the world police. Doesn't look so good." The bearded man laughed jokingly and personally reached out to grab Orleans. Orleans was about to ask who they were, but the bearded man didn't give him a chance to talk nonsense, and knocked him out with a knife. Then, two members of the Ten Rings gang carried Orleans, and the group quickly disappeared on the street, leaving only corpses and vehicles burning in flames. At the same time, in the parking lot of Stark Industries, after a busy day, Potts took the elevator down the parking lot and prepared to drive home. Her bodyguard team was waiting in the parking lot early, but when Potts walked out of the elevator, she instantly smelled a strong smell of blood. Suddenly, Potts' face changed, and she returned to the elevator without thinking. But as she turned around, she didn't know when there were two more fully armed strong men behind her. At this moment, a slender figure slowly walked out of the darkness. Tap, tap, tap. When the person walked out of the darkness, Potts immediately saw his appearance clearly, and frowned. "Who are you?" "Ms. Potts, hello. Let me introduce myself. My name is Norris. A friend of mine wants to invite you to visit. I'm sorry to use this way." Norris smiled at Potts politely. He and Potts had no grudges, and he had no intention of paying attention to her, but his partner specifically asked to see her, and he had to go there in person with his busy life. "Really? Then let's go. I also want to see who wants to see me," Potts said calmly, and her emotions had completely calmed down at this moment. As a woman who controls a chi-ball, Potts may not have superpowers, but her quality is definitely top-notch. The reaction of the heroine being kidnapped in the melodramatic TV series is destined to never appear on her. So, seeing that things were irreversible, she did not continue to struggle, otherwise it would be useless, except to anger the other party. Papa. After gently clapping his hands, a trace of appreciation flashed in Norris's eyes. As expected of the president of Stark Industries, this calmness is admirable. "Please follow me." Norris smiled and praised, then turned and led the way. Potts did not hesitate and followed directly. Soon, 3 cars rushed out of the underground parking lot. However, neither Norris nor the other members of the Ten Rings gang noticed that the pairs of scholar eyes in the car had opened at some point and were staring at them. The action of the Ten Rings gang was over, but things were far from over. They had just begun. Orleans was kidnapped. When this news came out, the entire upper class of the United States was shocked. All departments started to operate at the first time, especially the director of the Washington Police Department, who was dizzy by this big pot that fell from the sky. His phone was immediately hit, and voices of blame came from the phone. For a moment, this person who usually holds great power rolled out of bed and quickly gathered people to block the entire city and search for traces. In the seaside villa, Tony was sitting on the balcony, shaking a glass of red wine in his hand, with a casual posture and a calm expression. Suddenly, his eyebrows twitched slightly, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Finally showed up. "It's a little faster than I thought." After saying that, Tony raised his hand and drank the red wine in the glass. In his eyes, the scene of Potts being taken away by Norris appeared at this moment. As the woman he valued most, Tony was naturally very concerned about Potts' safety. Not only did he arrange top-level bodyguards, but he also had Black Shadow ninjas secretly accompanying her at any time. Therefore, the scene of Potts and Norris meeting, at this moment, fell into Tony's eyes through the perspective of the Black Shadow army. Chapter 103, Inject her with the Extremis virus. As long as Tony wanted, he could ask the Shadow Corps to take Potts back to him through the Shadow Kingdom at any time. But Tony didn't do that. The little mouse finally showed up. If he was scared away like this, when would he find him? He didn't have time to fool around with these little mice. So, Tony watched Potts' safety through the Shadow Core perspective, waiting to find their lair, while pouring himself a glass of red wine, and continuing to watch their performance. The vehicle drove out of Manhattan Shield, entered Bronx, and finally entered the underground parking lot of a building. On the passenger seat, Norris took the initiative to get out of the car and opened the door for Potts, saying very gentlemanly, "Ma'am, we're here." "Thank you." Nodding at him, Potts got out of the car with a calm face. If there weren't two members of the Ten Rings gang following her at all times to prevent her from escaping, this scene would not look like kidnapping at all. Entering the elevator, Norris pressed the top floor button. As the elevator rose, Norris, standing in front of the elevator door, smiled and said, "My partner is not a good person. Miss Potts, please be careful later." "Really? I also want to see what kind of vault friend he is," Potts said without comment. Norris smiled and didn't continue. A reminder is entirely out of appreciation for Potts' calmness. As for whether Potts took it to heart, he didn't care. Soon, the elevator stopped, and the elevator door slowly opened. A laboratory appeared in front of Potts. After searching the laboratory, a woman suddenly appeared in Potts' eyes. She was wearing a white coat and laboratory glasses on her face. The loose white coat could not completely cover her perfect figure, especially the pair of pineapples on her chest, which was even more eye-catching. Looking at this scene, Potts subconsciously straightened his chest, but soon relaxed like a discouraged person. Although she was not small, the gap was still visible to the naked eye, compared to the woman in the white coat. The female researcher, who didn't know that Potts had been comparing herself with her in secret, put down the experimental reagent in her hand when she heard the noise and turned to look at the elevator door. After seeing several people walking out of the elevator door, her eyes were directly locked on Potts, her eyes full of scrutiny. At this time, Norris stepped forward and said with a smile, "Excuse me, where is Mr. Killian? We have brought the person he wanted." Hearing this, the female researcher did not answer directly, but picked up a walkie-talkie on the table and said, "Killian, the person is here." Soon after the words fell, a door on the second floor of the laboratory opened, and Killian walked out of it. After seeing Potts in the crowd, Killian's eyes suddenly lit up, and he walked down quickly. "Potts, we meet again." Killian came to Potts and others and smiled. Potts looked at Killian and felt familiar, and soon, the memory that had been sealed in his mind was evoked again. "It's you." Potts frowned. She used to work with Killian, and they had a good relationship. Later, Killian disappeared for some unknown reason and she never saw him again. Unexpectedly, they met again in this situation. Killian was about to continue speaking, but Norris had to interrupt him. "Hello, Mr. Killian. We have fulfilled your conditions. The master asked me to ask you, when can you fulfill your promise?" Killian was a little dissatisfied with being interrupted, but he didn't say anything. He just nodded and said, "Don't worry, the plan is already underway. My promise will be fulfilled soon. Don't worry." In this way, I'm relieved. If everything is fine, we'll leave first. Go. Killian waved his hand, and Norris didn't stay. He took the elevator with two members of the Ten Rings and left. Soon, Potts and 3 others were the only ones left in the laboratory. "Potts, come and see. This is my company. How about it? It's exactly the same as Stark Industries." Killian waved his hand and pointed at the entire laboratory with a smile on his face. However, Potts was not interested in what he said and continued to frown and said, "You had someone kidnap me just to tell me this?" Sensing Potts' unfriendly tone, the smile on Killian's face froze, and then he laughed dryly and said, "Of course not. I want to say that I now have my own company, which is not much worse than Stark Industries. How about helping me?" At this moment, Killian was no longer as calm as when negotiating with Carls, and his tone seemed a little awkward. In Tony's words from his previous life, it is the licking dog effect. The simple explanation is that when facing his goddess, the licking dog will be so nervous that he can't even finish his words. Although Killian didn't act so exaggerated, it was not much different. "Sorry, I have a job. I appreciate your kindness, but I won't work for you. They both rejected Killian without hesitation. Suddenly, Killian's expression changed. Why? What's so good about Tony, that playboy? You would rather help him than help me? Killian said excitedly. Perhaps because of the mention of Tony, Killian's tone unconsciously carried a hint of murderous intent. Seeing his face gradually distorted, the disgust in Pot's eyes became more intense. She didn't know why Killian became like this, but it didn't prevent her from feeling disgusted with him. Tony is better than you. No matter what others say, I think he's good enough. If you're fine, please let me go. I have work tomorrow. Potts said impatiently. Killian burst into laughter, and his whole temperament became gloomy. Potts, you've changed. Killian said expressionlessly, turned his head to look at the female researcher next to him, and said in a cold tone, Maya, she's in your hands. Inject her with the extremis virus. Hearing this, Maya immediately walked up, with a cold arc at the corner of her mouth, and said, it should have been like this a long time ago. How can a woman who can get involved with Tony, a scumbag, be a good woman? After saying that, Maya stepped forward, and wanted to grab Potts. Seeing this, Potts stepped back and subconsciously wanted to dodge, but Maya seemed to have anticipated her move. Her expression remained unchanged, and she continued to grab Potts. Seeing that Potts was about to fall into her hands, at this moment, a dark wave appeared under Potts' feet, and two black shadow ninjas suddenly rose from the ground and blocked Potts. Clang! Two darts were fired from the hands of the black shadow ninjas, and Maya's face changed, and her body quickly flashed and dodged the dart attack. Potts was also stunned when he saw this scene, and he had no idea what was going on. Chapter 104, Vulnerable. Killian, who was walking back, also stopped at this moment. Looking at the black shadow ninja that suddenly appeared in front of Potts, his brows instantly frowned. What? No one answered. Even Potts didn't know about the black shadow ninja, let alone them. HMPH, playing tricks. Killian snorted coldly and suddenly moved. His figure instantly disappeared from the spot, leaving a trail of after images. When he appeared again, he was already in front of the black shadow ninja, and his huge fist landed directly on the black shadow ninja's head. Bang! Like a watermelon bursting, the heads of the two black shadow ninjas standing in front of Potts exploded directly. Seeing this, everyone was stunned. It appeared so strange, and the result was just like this? Killian couldn't help but sneer on his face. But before his smile could bloom completely, suddenly, black shadows surged on the ground, and one black shadow ninja after another rose from the ground. On the walls, on the ceiling, and around them, in a blink of an eye, Killian and Maya were surrounded by black shadow ninjas. Seeing this scene, Killian and Maya's faces suddenly changed. The two looked at the black shadow ninja with serious eyes, and they were secretly on guard. Potts was also stunned by the scene in front of her. She could feel that these black shadows seemed to be protecting her, but she had never come into contact with these things. Could it be? Potts thought of Tony. This was the only reason she could think of. At this moment, a familiar voice sounded behind her. What are you thinking about? So absent-minded? Hearing this, Potts turned around instantly, and Tony's figure suddenly appeared in front of her. Seeing this, Potts immediately covered her mouth with both hands, and a layer of mist gathered in her eyes. Although she had always acted very calm, it would be a lie to say that she was not afraid. Now that she had seen Tony, she finally didn't have to suppress her emotions anymore. For a moment, thousands of grievances surged in her heart. Why did you come just now? Potts said with a crying voice, and then plunged into Tony's arms. Holding Potts with both hands, Tony smiled softly, and comforted her softly. Don't worry, it's okay, don't cry, you will become a little cat if you cry again. Tony comforted Potts softly, patting her back with his palms a few times. Just when the two were in love, a roar interrupted the warm atmosphere between the two. Tony. Killian stared at Tony and the others with a ferocious face. Especially when he saw the two hugging each other, Killian's anger was burning. Similarly, Maya beside Killian also had an embarrassed expression at this moment. Especially when she saw Tony's tenderness towards Potts, she was even more furious. Why? Why should I be abandoned? But she can get your love. Wait for me on the side first. Looking at Killian and the others, Tony looked down at Potts and said, Potts, who had stabilized her emotions, nodded and then walked aside obediently. At this time, Tony turned around and looked at Killian and the other two. The smile on his face disappeared, replaced by indifference. Kill them. Tony didn't bother to talk nonsense with them and gave the order directly. As soon as he finished speaking, the shadow ninjas surrounding the two moved instantly and attacked the two directly. In an instant, Killian and Maya were overwhelmed by a large number of shadow ninjas. However, the two people who were injected with the desperate virus were indeed extraordinary. Not only were they extremely fast, but they were also very powerful. Although the shadow ninjas were numerous, they could not withstand the attack of the two, so it only took a little effort for the two to solve all the shadow ninjas. Tony, who had been quietly observing the two, saw this and instantly became interested. Desperate virus? Interesting. I wonder if the shadow army can use it. Tony muttered to himself, and at this time, a strong wind blew towards Tony. Killian, who had solved the shadow ninjas, rushed towards Tony without saying a word. His speed broke the sound barrier, causing a sonic boom in the air. Seeing that he was getting closer and closer to Tony, the corners of Killian's mouth suddenly curled up. He wanted to make this guy who was once high and mighty crawl at his feet and wash away the humiliation he had brought to him. Thinking this in his heart, his speed became faster and his strength became stronger. He seemed to have seen the scene where Tony was knocked away by his punch and begged for mercy like a dead dog. And just as he was immersed in fantasy, bang, his fist hit something hard. The next second, Killian looked closely and saw that Tony was holding his fist with one hand and looking at him expressionlessly. Seeing this, Killian's fantasy in his heart was shattered and a trace of disbelief appeared on his face. How is it possible? How did you block my punch? Killian stared at Tony and questioned. At this moment, his emotions were a little broken. It was not that he was fragile, but that he had worked so hard for today for so long, and he was about to avenge his previous shame, but in the end, Tony easily blocked his attack. This was not only a humiliation to him, but also a denial of his efforts for so long. Hearing his words, Tony's mouth curled up a trace of disdain, and he casually commented, "Too slow, too weak. That's it, you still want to seek revenge on me?" After saying that, Tony pulled hard, and Killian's figure suddenly rushed over uncontrollably, and then Tony kicked him out with one foot, directly kicking him out. Bang! The figure hit the test bench, a series of ping pong sounds rang out, and the things on the test bench were scattered all over the floor. Cough cough. A distant cough came from Killian's mouth, and Killian said in disbelief, "Impossible, how can you be so strong? It must be fake. Maya, kill him." Killian roared. Hearing this, Maya did not hesitate and rushed directly to Tony, and Killian took the opportunity to rush up again. The two of them attacked at the same time, one in front and one behind. Tony was still standing there without moving, and there was not even a little expression on his face. It was not until the two's attacks came close again that Tony slowly said, "Too slow, too weak." As soon as he finished speaking, Tony threw two lightning-fast punches, knocking Killian and the other man away again. Even when facing Maya, he showed no mercy. Seeing the two lying on the ground for a long time, Tony shook his head slightly. He had expected the two to give him a little surprise, but now it seems that it is just like that. Although the desperate virus is indeed very strong, there is no doubt that Tony is stronger. With the fusion of the rabbit spell and the bull spell, Tony completely crushes the two in terms of speed and strength. As a result, the two are like elementary school students in front of him, and they are completely vulnerable. Chapter 105, Giant Demon Fusion and Desperate Virus. This is impossible. This is impossible. Killian muttered to himself, with a hint of madness on his face. In order to get revenge, he spent 13 years and took risks to inject the extremis virus. He paid such a high price, but in the end he was no match for Tony's two punches and was killed instantly. How could he accept such a result? Thinking of this, his body quickly turned red, and the next second, a raging flame burst out of his mouth. The terrifying high temperature permeated, and the temperature of the entire laboratory rose rapidly. Feeling the changes in the surrounding environment, Tony's mind moved, and he used telekinesis to directly construct a transparent shield to cover Potts. Then, He looked at the fire dragon raging towards him without dodging and let the flames cover him. In an instant, Tony was engulfed by the flames. Tony Potts looked at this scene and screamed in surprise. He subconsciously wanted to move forward but was blocked by telekinesis. When Killian saw this scene, he laughed wildly. Die, die. As he spoke, he continued to spit out flames from his mouth. At this moment, he seemed to have transformed all the anger in his heart into flames, wanting to burn Tony alive. However, he was not happy for too long. Soon, he suddenly realized that something was wrong. The flames he spewed out were no longer under his control. All the flames began to gather in a certain direction, as if they were controlled by an invisible big hand, gradually turning into a fireball. At the same time, Tony's figure appeared again from the flames, looking at the fireball in his left hand calmly. With the integration of the dragon spell and the mastery of the rules of fire, the flames were like toys to Tony and could not cause any harm at all. The reason why he was swallowed was just to feel the power of the flames. It must be said that the desperate virus is indeed powerful. The temperature of the flames spewed out by Killian is about 5,000 degrees, which is very close to the temperature of the surface of the sun, enough to melt most things in the world. While thinking, Tony suddenly pinched his left hand. Suddenly, the fireball gathered by the flames went out directly in his palm. After doing all this, he turned his head again to look at the almost dazed Killian and the other man. He moved his body and appeared in front of Killian at a speed that the other two could not react to. Killian looked at Tony, who was so close, with a look of astonishment on his face. Just as he was about to say something, he saw that Tony's right hand had clamped his neck at some point and slowly lifted him up from the ground. Whoa. Killian felt a strong sense of suffocation. He was like a drowning man, kicking his hands and feet in the air and struggling violently. But under Tony's extremely powerful strength, all his struggles were in vain. Tony's right hand was like an iron clamp, firmly clamping his neck. The farce is over. Let's stop here, Tony said casually, and in an instant, a wisp of fire appeared between his palms, along Killian's neck, and quickly burned all over his body. Compared with Killian's flame, Tony's flame was obviously more domineering and stronger. Killian let out a roar like a wild beast. He was completely burned to ashes under Tony's flames, ending his sad life. Maya stared at the scene in front of her blankly. She had been in this state since she was knocked away by Tony's punch. It was not until Tony dealt with Killian and set his sights on her that Maya suddenly woke up. Don't kill me, Tony, don't kill me, Maya screamed. Witnessing Killian's death, she was scared. Fear filled her heart and made her tremble constantly. At this moment, she didn't want revenge, she just wanted to live. Looking at her, Tony didn't continue to attack. It wasn't that he pitied women, but he was interested in the extremis virus. So Maya was left behind. Although he could give the sample of the extremis virus to read for a search, he didn't want to make such a fuss with a ready-made candidate. Take me to see the extremis virus, Tony said in a calm tone. After that, Maya nodded quickly and agreed. Okay. After that, she turned around in a hurry and walked with Tony to the depths of the laboratory. The two of them soon appeared at the door of the cold storage, one in front of the other. As Maya entered the password, the door of the cold storage slowly opened. After the two walked into the cold storage, they came to a huge freezer. This is where the extremis virus is stored. As Maya opened the freezer, a tube of light blue liquid in the experimental agent tube appeared in front of Tony. This is the extremis virus. Seeing Tony's calm expression, Maya carefully introduced, the extremis virus has a super strong regenerative ability and can give people powerful strength, but the extremis virus cannot guarantee a 100% successful fusion. The fusion process is full of risks. The fusion may fail if you are careless, and even if the fusion is successful, it may explode because you cannot control the power in your body. Killian and I have tried to improve it before, but all ended in failure. If you want to inject the extremis virus, I can't guarantee that there will be no accidents. Obviously, Maya thought Tony was going to inject the extremis virus himself, but Tony would only touch this kind of thing if he was kicked in the head by a donkey. After looking at Maya, Tony was too lazy to explain. He directly reached out and took out her extremis virus from the freezer. Then, with a thought, a black shadow troll appeared behind the two of them. Suddenly feeling the shadow from behind, Maya subconsciously looked back, and suddenly, the whole person was frightened and took several steps back. Who is it? After saying that, Maya finally reacted and turned to look at Tony, looking at the black shadow troll dressed the same as the black shadow ninja. Sure enough, Tony had no reaction at all. Obviously he had expected it. Drink it. Tony handed the extremis virus to the black shadow troll behind him and ordered directly. After the words fell, the black shadow troll took the extremis virus without hesitation and threw it into his mouth together with the experimental tube. The horrible chewing sound echoed in the cold storage, and the black shadow troll made a crisp sound. Seeing this scene, Maya was stunned, and even Tony was a little speechless. This guy's really not picky about food. He eats everything. Soon, the extremis virus merged into the body of the black shadow troll, and Tony's face also showed a hint of expectation. The extremis virus is full of risks for humans, but there is no risk at all for the Black Shadow Army. After all, the Black Shadow Army is an immortal existence. The only thing that Tony was unsure about now was whether the extremis virus would be effective against dark creatures like the Shadow Legion. If it wasn't effective, then his work would be in vain. Chapter 106. 5 happies are not enough. Looking at the shadow troll with expectation in his eyes, as time passed, the shadow troll gradually changed, and a trace of fiery red lines began to emerge on his body, which was very conspicuous on his dark figure. At the same time, his figure was constantly changing at this moment, and his already tall body began to rise again, growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Soon, the height of the shadow troll reached 5 meters, and a group of strong muscles appeared on his body. The fiery red lines also covered his whole body at this moment, and the black and red lines made the shadow troll look more majestic. If the previous shadow troll was terrifying, but not deterrent enough, then now, the shadow troll can bring a strong sense of oppression to people, as long as it stands there. Looking at this scene, Tony showed obvious joy on his face. He bet right. The desperate virus can indeed have an impact on the Shadow Army. Thinking of this, Tony immediately turned to look at Maya, who was stunned, and said, "No matter what method you use, I want to see 10,000 extremis viruses every month." As soon as he finished speaking, Maya suddenly came back to her senses from the changes of the shadow troll. 10,000. This is too much, Maya said with a stuttering tone. "You don't need to worry about this. Anyway, I will give you the people and the money. I want to see 10,000 extremis viruses every month," Tony said directly in an imperative tone, and Maya naturally had to agree. Tony packed up the remaining extremis viruses and walked out of the cold storage. Coming to Potts, Tony stretched out his hand to hold hers, smiled gently and said, "Let's go home." Hearing this, Potts nodded, followed Tony obediently, and left Pioneer Technology. Following Tony quietly, she didn't ask any questions. As a smart woman, she knew that if Tony wanted her to know, he would tell her. If he didn't tell her, he didn't want her to know. So, she seemed to have forgotten everything that had just happened, and didn't ask anything. And Tony didn't mention it tacitly. He didn't want Potts to be exposed to these things. She just needed to live like an ordinary person. After sending Potts home, Tony didn't stay with Potts, but returned directly to the beach villa. The desperate virus has undoubtedly succeeded in strengthening the shadow trolls. However, it still needs to be tested to what extent the shadow trolls have improved their strength. So, Tony gave up the gentle country and called Happy. When he arrived at the beach villa, Happy had been waiting in the villa for a long time. As Tony walked in, Happy quickly stood up and said, "Boss." Nodding gently, Tony said, "Follow me." After that, Tony turned around and walked out again. Seeing this, Happy naturally hurried to follow. The two came to the lawn outside the villa. Tony's mind moved, and the shadow troll with the desperate virus suddenly appeared on the lawn. Looking at this scene, a trace of doubt flashed in Happy's eyes. "Go, fight him," Tony said. Happy was stunned. Looking at the 5-meter tall shadow troll, Happy swallowed his saliva and looked at Tony with a puzzled look on his face. That expression seemed to say, "Boss, are you serious?" Of course, Happy naturally didn't dare to ask this openly and could only smile awkwardly. "Boss, can you change someone?" "No, it's you. Don't waste time." Tony looked at Happy speechlessly. How could he let you get into trouble here? Seeing that Tony was determined, Happy's face suddenly showed a bitter smile, and he could only walk towards the shadow troll. As he got closer, Happy gradually felt a strong sense of oppression. For a moment, his face became serious and the whole person took a deep breath. Ha! With a loud shout, Happy's figure changed rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, his height reached 3 meters. Compared to ordinary people, this height is already very high, but compared to the shadow troll that has merged with the desperate virus, Happy is like an immature teenager, more than a head shorter. Seeing that Happy is ready, Tony did not hesitate, and directly ordered the attack. As soon as he finished speaking, the shadow troll, who had been standing quietly in place, moved instantly. Bang! As soon as he stepped on the lawn, a huge pit suddenly appeared, and his huge figure was instantly ejected. Not as heavy as imagined, the shadow troll's speed at this moment was extremely fast. Almost before Happy could react, the shadow troll had already appeared in front of him. The huge fist slammed into his face mercilessly, and the expression on Happy's face changed drastically, but he had no time to block it. Bang! With a loud bang, Happy was directly blown away. Boom! His body hit the ground heavily, creating a huge pit. For a moment, he couldn't move, but the shadow troll didn't stop. The flame pattern on his body lit up, as if he was alive. The flames instantly burned on his body, and then under the control of the shadow troll, he roared towards Happy. Seeing this scene, Happy was completely blown up. My god, he can even attack from a distance. Will he let people live? He was madly complaining in his heart. He didn't care about the pain in his body. He forced himself to support himself and rolled on the ground to avoid the impact of the flames. Boom. The flames fell on the ground and an explosion sounded. The pit that was originally 1 meter wide expanded directly to 3 meters. Seeing this horrible scene, Happy, who had escaped a disaster, only felt his eyelids twitching violently. "Boss." Happy called Tony. Tony turned his head away from him and asked him to continue. Seeing this, Happy was about to cry, but he had no choice but to continue fighting with the shadow troll. Of course, fighting is just a nice way of saying it. In fact, he was beaten the whole time. The shadow trolls that merged with the desperate virus were very powerful and completely crushed him. The power he was proud of was not comparable to the shadow trolls. And more importantly, his speed and reaction ability could not keep up with the shadow trolls. So, in addition to being beaten, he did not even have the ability to fight back. Fortunately, his defense was good. After being beaten for so long, he did not suffer too serious injuries except for the pain. Tony watched the battle for a long time and had a rough assessment of the shadow trolls that merged with the desperate virus. Take Happy as an example. If the shadow trolls who did not merge with the desperate virus wanted to deal with Happy, at least 3 or more were needed. After merging with the desperate virus, 5 Happys were not enough for the shadow trolls to beat with one hand. Compared with before, the strength of the shadow trolls has more than doubled tenfold. And this is just one shadow troll. When thousands of shadow trolls merged with the desperate virus appear, that scene is shocking just to think about. Chapter 107, The 10 Rings Gang surfaces. While Tony was testing the strength of the black shadow troll, the outside world had completely turned upside down. Aliens had been missing for 3 hours. With the full tracking of the Washington Shield Police Department, they finally found a clue. The kidnappers had taken him away from Washington Shield. According to the traces left, their destination should be New York. Therefore, the upper echelons of the United States called SHIELD directly and asked them to take over the matter. After all, New York was the headquarters of SHIELD and was the most suitable place to take over the matter. Nick, who got the news, got up from bed overnight and summoned the backbone of SHIELD to arrange the task. Soon, the whole of New York was under the surveillance of SHIELD. At the same time, outside of Pioneer Technology, a row of convoys drove directly into the underground parking lot of Pioneer Technology. The bearded man who kidnapped aliens got out of the car and took the elevator to the top floor. When the elevator door opened, looking at the mess in the laboratory, the bearded man's face suddenly changed, and the whole person subconsciously became alert. At this time, Maya walked out of the cold storage and looked at the bearded man with a surprised face. "Who are you? Where is Mr. Killian?" The bearded man did not answer, but asked instead. Hearing this, Maya's thoughts quickly turned. She looked at the clothes on the bearded man, which were the same as those worn by Norris before, and they were obviously from the same organization. As for these people, Killian had always been in contact with them before, and Maya did not know much about them, but she knew that now she must not let anyone know that Killian was gone, otherwise, her situation might be dangerous. Therefore, Maya quickly suppressed the waves in her heart and said calmly, "Mr. Killian went out for something. Where did he go?" The bearded man continued to ask, and his brows frowned quietly. "I don't know about that. But you can tell me, if you have anything to say. When he comes back, I will tell him for you." "You? Who are you?" The bearded man looked Maya up and down, his eyes full of distrust. Maya did not mind this, and directly said her name. "Maya Hansen." After the words fell, the suspicion in the bearded man's eyes dissipated a little. Since they were working with Killian, it was natural that they could not know nothing about Killian. As Killian's partner, Maya should be trustworthy in his heart. "It's Ms. Maya. I have delivered the goods. Since Mr. Killian is not here, please accept them." Hearing this, Maya's mind moved. Although she didn't know what the goods were, she had to pretend at this time. Nodding indifferently, Maya said calmly, "I know. Bring the goods up. I will tell Killian." Hearing this, the bearded man no longer hesitated and picked up the intercom and said, "Bring the goods up." "Yes." The person on the intercom responded, and soon, a voice came from the elevator. The elevator door slowly opened, and two fully armed strong men escorted a man in a suit and a black hood on his head. At the same time, the voice of the bearded man also sounded at this moment. "Ms. Maya, I have delivered the person. Do you need me to help you detain him? Send him to the cold storage." Maya nodded, with an indifferent face throughout the whole process. Even when she saw that the so-called goods were a person, she didn't show any surprise, as if she had known about this matter for a long time. Seeing this, the bearded man who had been observing her reaction finally eliminated the last bit of doubt in his heart. Since Maya knew what the goods were, it meant that she was also involved in this matter. In this case, there was no need to be shy. Soon, under Maya's leadership, two strong men sent the people to the cold storage for detention. The temperature inside was very low, but it would not freeze people to death in a short time, so Maya directly locked the door. After the handover was completed, the bearded man did not stay any longer and turned around and left with his men. However, before leaving, he still urged, "Ms. Maya, please tell Mr. Killian that we have completed what he ordered. Now we are waiting for his plan to start. I hope there will be no mistakes." "I know." Maya responded and finally watched them leave in the elevator. After the elevator arrived on the first floor, Maya quickly called up the surveillance of the underground parking lot. After watching the bearded man and others leave pioneer technology with her own eyes, she immediately turned around and walked into the cold storage. Looking at the man shivering in the corner of the warehouse, Maya did not hesitate and directly pulled off the black hood on his head. Suddenly, Orleans's face appeared in Maya's eyes. Instantly, Maya's pupils shrank, and her heart was filled with shock. As the most powerful man in the United States, Orleans often appeared on TV. Although Maya didn't watch TV much, she had seen him. Especially after being injected with the desperate virus, her memory was greatly improved, so she recognized Orleans' identity at a glance. Orleans, who had regained his sight, squinted his eyes to adapt to the light, and then he saw Maya clearly in front of him. He thought that some terrorist leader was waiting for him, but he didn't expect to see a beautiful woman when he opened his eyes, which made Orleans a little stunned. Just when he was about to say something, but before he could speak, Maya suddenly stepped forward and chopped his neck with a knife, knocking him unconscious. After doing this, Maya left the cold storage as soon as possible and called Tony. Beep. Accompanied by a busy tone, the call was soon connected, and Tony's voice came from the phone. "What's the matter?" Hearing this, Maya told everything exactly as it happened without any hesitation. The moment she saw aliens, she knew that this matter was beyond her ability and she couldn't handle it at all, so she could only leave it to Tony. At the beach villa, Tony's eyes were also filled with surprise after listening to Maya's story. Good man, he really underestimated this guy Killian, who dared to do such a crazy thing. However, in addition to aliens, he was also concerned about the force that took action. Therefore, after listening to Maya's story, Tony asked directly, "Do you know which force sent the person here?" Hearing this, Maya was silent for a moment, and then said, "Killian was responsible for handling these things before, I'm not very clear. However, they all have a word on their chests." Tony murmured in his mouth, and the three words Ten Rings Gang instantly appeared in his mind. Although he was not sure if it was them, Tony was 80% sure that those people should be members of the Ten Rings Gang. After all, there are not many organizations named, and there are even fewer who have the courage to kidnap aliens. Apart from the infamous Ten Rings Gang, he couldn't think of anyone else who would have the guts to do that. Chapter 108. The opportunity came to me. Tony muttered to himself, while Maya on the other end of the phone said anxiously, "What should I do now?" With such a huge hot potato in hand, Maya couldn't keep calm. "Keep an eye on him, I'll have someone take him away later," Tony said calmly, his eyes full of thought. For Maya, this was a hot potato, but for Tony, it was an opportunity to control the upper echelons of the United States. Although he is already very powerful now, there are consortiums that can rival Stark Industries. Tony naturally didn't have any ideas before. After all, Stark Industries has already stood at the top, and it is impossible to go further, even if he wants to. But now, someone has given him the opportunity, and Tony will naturally not watch the opportunity slip away. If the peak of power in the United States and Stark Industries join forces, the effect will not be as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. At that time, Tony can completely use this influence to bring Stark Industries to another peak. "Okay, I know," Maya responded and hung up the phone. After hanging up the phone, Tony turned to look at Happy, who was bruised and swollen, and said, "Go to Avant-Garde Technology and bring the people back." "Okay, boss." After listening to the order, Happy nodded directly, then turned around and left the villa and drove to Avant-Garde Technology. On the other side, after checking the surveillance of the entire New York City, SHIELD finally found the location of the Ten Rings. Although they tried to avoid surveillance all the way, in a big city like New York, the surveillance is too dense. The fact that they were not discovered until now is already due to the outstanding ability of the Ten Rings. After getting the clue, Mac did not hesitate at all, and directly dispatched Steve and other extraordinary people. Although he could mobilize a large number of people, the rescue operation was not the more people the better. 13th Avenue, this is the road with the least surveillance out of New York City. The bearded man sat in the car with his eyes closed, and the others remained alert throughout the journey. They knew very well the current situation of themselves and others. Although it was calm now, it was hard to say when danger would occur. What you fear will come. Suddenly, the roar of a helicopter came from the sky. The next second, a shield flew down from the sky and smashed towards the front vehicle of the Ten Rings Gang. The shield hit the tire of the vehicle accurately, and the high-speed vehicle rolled over and caused a huge explosion. Boom. The flames shot up into the sky, dispelling the darkness. The road was completely blocked by the exploding car, causing the convoy behind to stop. On the helicopter, Nick and others gathered at this moment. Barton held a sniper rifle in his hand and scanned every car through the sniper scope. He shook his head with a serious face. Mr. Aliens was not found. He is not in the car. Last time, Barton was controlled by Loki and did a lot for Loki, but after the matter was over, Loki no longer needed him and released the control, so he saved his life. Just now, after he confirmed that Aliens was not in the first car, Steve took action to blow up the vehicle and stop the convoy. Otherwise, he really didn't dare to do so. Listening to Patton's report, everyone on the helicopter looked uglier. At the critical moment, Nick ordered, "Take them down first, and remember to leave them alive." Understood. Everyone responded loudly, and below, the members of the Ten Rings Gang who were intercepted also got off the car. Looking at the helicopter flying towards them in the sky, the bearded man said with a gloomy face, "Shoot it down for me." After that, a member of the Ten Rings gang directly set up a rocket launcher. With a roar, the rocket was launched with a tail flame, and it hit the helicopter in the sky accurately. Seeing this scene, Nick's expression changed, and he immediately shouted, "Banner." Suddenly, Banner jumped down from the helicopter. His figure quickly expanded in the air, turned into a Hulk, and blocked the rocket with his body. Boom. The fireworks of the explosion appeared in the sky, but all the impacts were blocked by Banner. The helicopter behind him did not suffer much damage, except that it was shaken by the airflow. Boom. Banner's figure landed, a huge roar sounded, and the whole ground shook. He was like a god descending to Earth, mighty and domineering. At the same time, the helicopter also lowered its altitude at this moment, lowered the rappelling rope, and Steve and others grabbed the rope, and landed smoothly one by one. Attack. Looking at Banner's image, the bearded man was trembling, and quickly issued an attack order. Suddenly, a fierce gunshot rang out, and countless bullets whizzed towards Banner. The bullets fell on his skin, making a ding-dong sound, and could not break his defense at all. At the same time, Banner also roared, and rushed up at this moment. His huge figure made the earth tremble with every step he took. Soon, he rushed into the crowd and started killing. Compared with Banner, the people of the Ten Rings gang were like tiny ants at this moment, and they were not vulnerable at all. As Banner's punch fell, he smashed several people into meat patties on the spot. Such a horrible killing method, coupled with Banner's unbreakable defense. Suddenly, the living people of the Ten Rings gang collapsed. At that moment, everyone fled in all directions. Seeing this, Banner grabbed a stone from the ground and threw it at the crowd. For a while, many people were smashed to pieces by Banner. In the back, Nick and others looked at Banner's killing, and their expressions changed. They still had to find clues through these people. If Banner killed everyone, the clues would be broken. Thinking of this, Nick said anxiously, "Banner, leave a living person." After the words fell, Banner, who was a little bit overwhelmed, did not stop his actions, and continued to kill. Seeing this, Nick could only turn his head, and look at Steve helplessly. Seeing his eyes, Steve immediately understood what he meant, and rushed directly to Banner, punched Banner and knocked him back. And this sudden attack also calmed Banner down. At this point, the killing stopped completely, but there were not many living people left at the scene at this moment. Fortunately, Nick and others found the bearded man who had escaped by chance in the crowd. Although the bearded man looked embarrassed, he was not injured. Nick and his companions surrounded him, and looked at the bearded man. Nick said in a deep voice, "Tell me, where did you take the man? Hey, you won't find him, and don't expect me to tell you." The bearded man acted very tough. Seeing this, Nick was too lazy to talk nonsense, and gestured to Hawkeye. Hawkeye walked up immediately with a cold face. As a top agent, he is not only powerful, but also proficient in various interrogation methods. Soon, a scream sounded in the dark night. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 109. You are our good citizen. 20 minutes later, Hawkeye wiped the blood off his hands and returned to the crowd. The bearded man on the ground was dead, and they also got the information they wanted. Let's go to Avant-Garde. Nick made a prompt decision, and the group returned to the helicopter again, and headed for Avant-Garde. Without delay, they soon arrived at Avant-Garde, entered the underground parking lot, and took the elevator directly to the top floor. When the elevator door opened, Maya, who was about to leave the laboratory, was completely speechless when she saw Nick and others suddenly breaking in. Every day, do you really treat this place as a vegetable market? Anyone can come up. The elevator of Avant-Garde technology is naturally restricted, and it can only be started by swiping a card. The building restriction card that Killian gave to the Ten Rings gang was now transferred from the bearded man to Nick and others, so they could pass through unimpeded. "Who are you?" Maya said expressionlessly. She didn't know how many times she had said this sentence tonight, so she was a little numb. "We are officials. You are suspected of a kidnapping case. Stay where you are," Nick said coldly. Maya was not panicked at all. "Evidence. The evidence will be there soon." Nick said meaningfully, and then waved his hand. Steve and others immediately dispersed to the laboratory, searching for Orleans' traces. Seeing this, Maya did not stop them, but just folded her hands and watched the scene quietly. Looking at her calm face, Nick, who was originally full of confidence, suddenly felt a little nervous, and a bad premonition rose in his heart. Sure enough, when Hawkeye found the cold storage according to the confession, he did not find any trace of Orleans. At the same time, Steve and others who were searching in other places did not find any clues at this moment. This made Nick frown instantly. Looking at Maya, who was fearless, Nick said word by word, "Ms. Maya should not mind letting us check the surveillance." "Whatever." Maya nodded indifferently. She was relieved. When Happy took Orleans away, he had deleted the surveillance footage. She didn't understand it before, but now she understood it all. Hawkeye checked the surveillance footage, but there were only yesterday's footage in the surveillance footage, and today's footage was not visible at all. Seeing this, Nick couldn't help but say in a deep voice, "Ms. Maya, what's going on?" As he spoke, Nick stepped forward, exuding a sense of oppression, trying to see something from Maya in this way. But after experiencing so many things tonight, Maya had already calmed down. Facing the sense of oppression emanating from Nick, she not only did not feel any discomfort, but even wanted to laugh. "Maybe the surveillance footage is broken, I don't know. By the way, do you have any evidence? If not, do you have a search warrant?" Maya spoke one after another, gradually taking the initiative on the field. Nick also had a headache when he heard this. Things were completely different from what he imagined. He thought he should be sure of success this time, but he found nothing. According to the testimony of the bearded man, he sent the person here for a while, and the whole process did not exceed an hour, including the time they were delayed. Logically, the person should be here. Thinking helplessly, Nick had to force his smile on his face and said, "Sorry, maybe we made a mistake." After that, Maya's face turned cold. "Mistaken? So there is no search warrant? You are trespassing. Now, please leave. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow." After that, Maya made a gesture to send them away. Nick and others had no choice but to leave Pioneer Technology. At the entrance of Pioneer Technology, Nick looked back at the building behind and said in a serious tone, "Captain, what do you think?" Hearing this, Steve's eyes flashed with a trace of thought. Either the guy lied and the person is not here at all, or the woman noticed something was wrong in advance, moved the person away, and cleared the evidence. However, I prefer the latter possibility. Just as I thought. "Hawkeye, you take people to monitor her 24 hours a day. I want to know all her whereabouts." "Okay," Hawkeye said coldly. At the moment, except Hawkeye, the group got into the car and left directly. They still had to search for other clues. At the beach villa, Happy parked the car at the door. After the car stopped, Happy got out of the cab, opened the trunk, and carried out a sack from it. Watching the sack enter the villa, Tony, who was waiting in the living room, couldn't help but twitch his mouth when he saw this scene. After all, he is a man standing at the pinnacle of power in the United States. Can't you people be a little friendlier to others? Thinking helplessly, Tony immediately waved his hand and said, "Let the man out." "Okay, boss." Happy put down the sack with a silly smile and let Orleans out. Looking at Orleans, who was in a coma, Tony picked up the red wine on the table and poured it directly on his face. Cough cough. A violent cough sounded. Happy looked at Tony in surprise. After all, he is a man standing at the pinnacle of power. Can't his boss be a little respectful to others? Tony, who had no idea of Happy's thoughts, looked at Orleans, who had just woken up, and a smile appeared on his lips. He took the initiative to greet him. "Hello, Mr. Orleans. You are Tony Stark." Orleans said in surprise. "You kidnapped me? Don't get me wrong, I should say that I saved you." Tony waved his hand. He didn't want to take the blame. Hearing this, Orleans did not refute and immediately smiled and said, "Really? Thank you so much, Tony. I have heard of you, a good citizen of the United States. Can you untie me? I feel uncomfortable being tied up." Orleans seemed to be unaware of his embarrassment and thanked him sincerely. Looking at his appearance, Tony smiled. "Mr. Orleans, you are indeed a politician. Even an Oscar-winning actor can't compare to your acting skills." "Tony, what do you mean?" Orleans said curiously, with a very natural expression. If Tony hadn't been covering him with telekinesis and could feel his emotional fluctuations, he would have been almost deceived. This guy was clearly filled with anger and even showed murderous intent after waking up just now, but he didn't show it on his face at all, which was really admirable. It's nothing. I just wanted to have a good talk with you to see if there is any possibility of cooperation, but now there is no need to talk. Tony shook his head. Would someone who had murderous intentions towards him cooperate with him? Tony didn't think he had such great personal charm, so he had to use unconventional means. Chapter 110 Elite Scientist Loki. Tony spoke casually, and Orleans, who was tied to the ground, suddenly changed his expression. A trace of unnaturalness flashed in his eyes, but he quickly suppressed it. Acting? What do you mean? Tony, I'm really grateful to you, without any falsehood. Didn't you just say that you want to cooperate? In view of your saving me, I agree to any cooperation you have. Orleans said with a sincere face, and threw a lot of blank checks. Even now, he is still trying to save himself. Such a scene made Tony feel very emotional. These people are simply smart. If it were an ordinary person, he would have cursed at this moment, but he always maintained the attitude at the beginning. Tony was a little reluctant to attack him. Unfortunately, this idea only lingered in Tony's mind for less than a second before he threw it out of his mind. Although he admired Orleans' reaction, he needed Orleans to cooperate unconditionally and become his own. Therefore, Tony ignored his words and said directly to the air, "Jarvis, ask Loki to come up." "Okay, sir." After receiving the order, Jarvis agreed immediately. Soon, there was a sound of footsteps at the entrance of the underground laboratory. Loki, wearing a white coat, a pair of gold-rimmed glasses on his nose, and full of the temperament of an elite scientist, walked out of the underground laboratory slowly. Seeing his changes, Tony's eyes flashed with surprise. At the beginning, it was just his idea to trick Loki into studying technology. Unexpectedly, Loki seemed to gradually get into the role now, like a mad scientist, staying in the underground laboratory all day. He suspected that, if he hadn't called him, this guy would stay at home forever. Just as Tony was sighing, Loki came to him and said, "What's the matter?" Without any nonsense, Loki directly asked Tony's purpose. Hearing this, Tony pointed at Orleans on the ground, raised his eyebrows and said, "Help me see if I can control this guy." After saying this, Loki looked at Orleans expressionlessly and then nodded without hesitation. "No problem. How long do you need to control him?" "Forever." "Okay." The conversation between the two was very concise, and Orleans, who was listening to the conversation between the two, changed his expression again and again at this moment. "Hey, Tony, you can't do this. It's illegal for you to do this. We can discuss anything, no matter what. I can cooperate with you. There is no need to do this." Orleans spoke quickly with a hint of urgency. Even now, he still maintained his calm. But unfortunately, Tony had made up his mind, and his verbal offensive was completely useless to Tony, which could be said to be a waste of effort. Orleans knew this in his heart, but he had no choice. After all, he had no other means, except using words to resolve the danger. But after all, he was not the protagonist of an online novel, and there was no way to resolve the crisis through verbal attacks. As he continued to talk, trying to persuade Tony with his words, Loki, who was watching him, suddenly had a glimmer in his eyes. As the light flashed, Orleans, who was originally talking non-stop, suddenly shut up, which seemed very abrupt. Then, Loki flicked his fingers again, and Orleans' expression suddenly changed. "Master," Orleans said to Tony with a blank expression and full of respect. Seeing this scene, Tony's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise, and then he smiled with his mouth up. "Your ability of mind control is getting better and better." In response, Loki waved his hand casually, not taking Tony's praise to heart. "Okay, he will respect you in the future. Even if he is asked to commit suicide, he will not hesitate. Anything else? My research has reached a critical moment. If there is nothing else, I will go back first." Hearing this, Tony shook his head. Loki turned around and returned to the basement again. Happy, who witnessed the whole scene, swallowed his saliva and looked at the direction where Loki left with some fear in his eyes. This ability to change a person's mind at will is really chilling. What's your name? Half aliens. How old are you this year? 58 years old. What color do you like? White. Tony looked at aliens and asked some irrelevant questions. After a test, he was finally completely sure that aliens in front of him had become his most loyal subordinate, and a satisfied smile immediately appeared on his face. Happy, untie him and take him to wash up. He ordered Happy, who was a little dazed on the side. Suddenly, Happy came back to his senses from the shock and nodded quickly. Okay boss, I know. After that, he stepped forward to untie the rope on aliens and took him to wash up and eat. Tony turned around and sat down on the balcony, listening to the sound of the waves constantly hitting the reef, thinking about the next arrangement for aliens. First of all, aliens must not stay here any longer. Only when he returns to that position can he be valuable to Tony. Secondly, although Loki's mind control is overbearing, it may not be able to maintain the current effect forever. So there must be some surveillance. He plans to arrange some Black Shadow ninjas to protect him closely. First, it is for safety, to prevent such a situation from happening again. And second, even if there is any change, he can receive the news in time. Thoughts in his mind kept rolling. Tony perfected his plan, and an hour passed unknowingly. Aliens, who took a shower and ate something, became energetic and no longer embarrassed. After taking a look at his condition, Tony turned his head and looked at Happy on the side and said, send him away from here. Find a place without surveillance to put him down, and you should pay attention to hiding yourself. Okay boss. Happy responded. With his limited IQ, he naturally couldn't see the intention of Tony's arrangement. But as a loyal executor, he didn't need to understand. He just needed to follow Tony's instructions and complete them meticulously. Soon, the two left the villa and got in the car. As the car started, it quickly disappeared into the darkness. Blanche Park, Happy directly left aliens here without even looking at him and quickly disappeared from the spot. After watching the car go away, aliens immediately found a place with surveillance and wandered around. After doing all this, he waited quietly. He believed that someone would find him. Friends who have read this, if you haven't given a star review yet, please give a 5-star review. Thank you everyone. Chapter 111. Lord Man wants to meet this rich man. In the monitoring room of S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick and others did not rest after returning to S.H.I.E.L.D., but continued to check the monitoring of the whole city in the monitoring room, looking for clues. However, since no relevant clues were obtained in the Pioneer technology, their inquiry had no relevant direction at all, and it was more like looking for a needle in a haystack. For a time, not only the staff of S.H.I.E.L.D. were tired, but even Nick and others gradually became less concerned. In their opinion, continuing to search like this was simply a waste of time and there was no possibility of any progress. So the only way was to continue to lock on Maya and find some clues from her. Just as Nick was thinking about how to make Maya surrender, a scream suddenly sounded in the monitoring room. A S.H.I.E.L.D. staff member suddenly stood up from his position, pointed at a monitoring screen with a shocked face and shouted, Director, look, is this Mr. Aliens? After speaking, Nick suddenly stood up from his position and walked quickly towards the staff. When his eyes looked at the figure in the monitoring personally, a scream suddenly came out of Nick's mouth. How is it possible? They spent so much manpower and resources to search for aliens throughout the city, but to no avail. Now aliens actually came out on his own initiative, and things looked weird. But he also knew that now was not the time to dwell on these things. Coming to his senses, Nick immediately gave a loud order, lock this location, and immediately arrange for someone to pick up Mr. Aliens, quickly. Yes. Everyone responded and quickly took action. Nick even went to the scene with a large number of fully armed S.H.I.E.L.D. members. 20 minutes later, more than a dozen cars stopped in front of aliens, and a large number of people quickly got off the car to guard the surroundings to prevent possible emergencies. Nick strode towards aliens and said respectfully, Sir. After he finished speaking, aliens showed a friendly and polite smile on his face. You must be Nick Fury. You've worked hard, and I have to ask you to come here in person so late. It's not hard. This is what I should do. Just, sir, I heard that you were kidnapped. Can I ask how you got rid of the kidnappers? Nick asked with a hint of doubt in his tone. It's not that he didn't believe Olean's identity, but this matter was so weird. The kidnappers spent so much money to kidnap Oleans, and Oleans should be trapped in a cage now, and he shouldn't appear on the street alone. And he had already observed Oleans when he got off the car just now. Although his clothes were a little embarrassed, his face was ruddy and his spirit was stable. His face looked very calm from beginning to end, without any urgency, as if he was not worried that someone would catch him back. This didn't look like the reaction of a person who escaped. So although Oleans was successfully found, Nick not only did not feel that the matter was resolved, but even felt that the matter was getting weirder. As for this problem, Oleans had already had an excuse in his mind, so he told his excuse without panic. According to him, a superhero happened to encounter a robber when fighting crime, so he was saved. In his narration, this reason seemed very reasonable and there was nothing abrupt. Nick nodded in agreement on the surface, but secretly still felt something was wrong. Unfortunately, he didn't know where this wrong feeling came from, so he could only give up thinking temporarily and take the person back to SHIELD. With Olean's successful return, the news spread throughout the upper echelons of the United States in just 1 hour. After receiving this news, the upper echelons of the United States were happy and worried, because not everyone was willing to see Olean's return successfully. But no matter what they thought in their hearts, everyone showed a relieved look on their faces. Oleans did not stay in SHIELD for too long, and took the helicopter arranged by SHIELD that night, and returned to Manhattan Shield. Although he had been missing for less than 24 hours, the impact was profound. There were a lot of things waiting for him to deal with, so he had no time to stay for too long. Time passed, and soon, the sun rose again the next day. In the morning news, Olean stood in the studio, angrily denounced the terrorist armed forces, and expressed his determination to fight them to the end. To most people, this was just an everyday political show. But in a mysterious base somewhere, Olean's behavior was a provocation. Oh, interesting. A middle-aged man with long hair, thin figure, and gloomy temperament watched the morning news and said hoarsely. There was a smile on his lips, but it gave people a particularly cold feeling. At this moment, there was a knock on the door of the room. Come in, the man said hoarsely. Suddenly, the door was pushed open, and a sturdy bald man walked into the room. There was a scorpion tattooed on his shiny bald head, making him look extremely fierce. Sir, you are looking for me. Go check. I want to know why he is here. As he said that, the long-haired man raised his hand and pointed at Oleans on TV. Seeing this, the bald man immediately saluted. I understand, sir. I will investigate this matter thoroughly. After saying that, the bald man turned and walked out of the room. Soon, as orders were issued one after another, the members of the Ten Commandments gang who had infiltrated the United States took action one after another. Their means of gathering intelligence were very crude, kidnapping and threatening, but it must be said that this method was very effective. In just a few hours, they had already found out the ins and outs of the matter. After all, the huge pioneer technology is not just mere. The security and night staff also experienced what happened last night. Although they did not participate in it personally, they could infer the whole story just by the information they saw. When the bald man got the news, he immediately fed it back to the long-haired man. Listening to the bald man's report, the long-haired man smiled silently, and his white teeth flashed a cold edge under the light. Just like a predator about to hunt, he showed an attacking posture. Tony Stark. Interesting. You keep ruining my good deeds. I want to see how capable you are. Make arrangements. I want to go to the United States to meet this rich man. After saying this, the bald man was shocked, his eyes full of surprise. How long has it been since their master took action? 10 or 20 years. Although the whole organization has always been talking about the master's divine power, few people have seen it with their own eyes. Now, he finally has this opportunity. Thinking of this, the bald man licked the corner of his lips excitedly. I'll arrange it right away. Chapter 112. Give Tony a small gift. At the New York airport, a plane slowly landed. A group of sturdy men surrounded a bald man and a long-haired middle-aged man, and walked slowly to the airport. Seeing this group of people who met along the way subconsciously stayed away, watching them leave with awe. Outside the airport, a row of luxury cars were waiting at the exit. After the long-haired middle-aged man and others got in the car slowly started and left the airport. Although the Ten Commandments gang is a terrorist organization, they all have legal and reasonable identities on the surface. And the identities of this group of people are the top executives of a security company in the United States. In the back seat, the long-haired man was resting with his eyes closed. The bald man sat beside him, flipping through the information, and asked respectfully, "Sir, do you want to start the action directly? No hurry. First, please send a gift to Tony for me, and also help me make an appointment with Carls. I want to meet him." Understood. The bald man nodded, quickly took out his mobile phone, and made a few calls to make arrangements. Half an hour later, a courier arrived at Carol's official residence. It was specified that Carol's should sign for it in person. Therefore, the nanny who opened the door could only turn around to find Carol's, who had a rare day off. Soon, Carol's appeared at the door. Looking at the courier, his eyes were full of doubts. "Who asked you to deliver it?" The courier listened to his words, his face full of cautiousness. After all, the man in front of him was one of the few people standing at the pinnacle of power in the United States. "Mr. Carroll's, I don't know who sent it, but it was specified that you must sign for it in person." Hearing this, Carroll frowned, but did not embarrass him. He nodded and signed for the courier. He was not afraid of danger. After all, the things that could enter here must have been repeatedly checked. If the courier really contained some explosives or dangerous items, the courier would not have come here at all. After sending the courier away, Carroll took the courier back to the study. When he opened the courier, there was a disc inside, and nothing else. Looking at the disc in his hand, Carroll did not hesitate, and directly put it into the VCD and played it. Soon, as the screen flickered, his figure appeared on the screen. Seeing this, Carl's expression suddenly changed, and he stood up from his seat. The content of the disc was nothing else but all the content of his previous conversation with Killian. There was only him in the picture, and the angle of the shot was the direction where Killian was sitting at the time. Seeing this, he didn't understand where the disc came from. Fuck. Curses kept coming out of Killian's mouth, and Carl's blood pressure rose. However, he didn't turn off the screen, but continued to watch. Sure enough, when he finished talking with Killian, the screen flickered and became dark, and then a synthesized voice came from the TV. "Mr. Carls, good afternoon. I have booked a seat at the private club at 7 o'clock tonight. Looking forward to your visit." After that, a line of address appeared on the screen, and the content of the disc ended there. Looking at the TV screen that was completely dark, Carls fell into deep thought with a gloomy face. He didn't expect that he would be blinded by geese after hunting them all day. Although the voice in the video did not issue any threats or warnings, the content played in the front was the most powerful threat. He knew that if he could not keep the appointment on time, the content in the front would probably appear in front of everyone tomorrow. At that time, he would definitely not have any good results for the crime he committed. After all, he betrayed aliens, which was no different from treason. So no matter how angry he was, when the time came to 6 o'clock in the evening, he still left home and went to the appointment. At the same time, at the Stark Industrial Building, a courier with a tightly wrapped package was delivered to the front desk of the Stark Industrial Building by a courier. At this time, because it was the peak time, after get off work, there were many people at the front desk. When the time came to 6:10, a terrible explosion suddenly sounded, and the front desk of the Stark Industrial Building turned directly into a sea of fire. More than a dozen people died on the spot, and dozens of people were injured. For a time, the whole scene became noisy and lively. Thank Club, the top private club in New York City, is open exclusively to the rich. When Carls came here according to the address, a strong man locked his eyes on him and walked up to him quickly. "Mr. Carls, my master has been waiting for a long time. Please follow me," the strong man said in a strong tone, without much respect in his words. But Carls was too lazy to care, and followed him into the club without saying a word. Passing through the corridors, the two entered the depths of the club and soon stopped in front of a box. The strong man stretched out his hand and made a gesture of invitation. Carls did not hesitate and pushed the door and walked in. Needless to say, the luxury in the box Carl's attention was directly on the two people in the box. A long-haired man sat in the middle, and a bald man stood beside him. After glancing at the bald man, Carl's eyes fell on the long-haired man. He knew that the man in front of him was the real owner. "You asked me to meet. Now that I'm here, can you tell me who you are?" He sat opposite the long-haired man without hesitation, and said in a calm tone. It was as if this place was his home ground, without showing any cowardice. Listening to Carl's words, a smile appeared on the long-haired man's face, and then a hoarse voice sounded in the box. "You call me Mandarin, but I prefer you to call me Mandarin." As soon as these words came out, Carl's, who had maintained his composure, changed his expression instantly. He thought that the identity of the person who came might not be simple, but he didn't expect that the person who came was Mandarin. For this name, ordinary people may not have too much feeling, but for Western countries, this name is their deepest nightmare. Since the beginning of the 19th century, this name has begun to appear in the West, and many people died because of him at that time. For this reason, Western countries joined forces to wipe him out, but this man showed a godlike power, not only destroying the coalition forces of various countries, but also causing great losses to various countries, and once became a nightmare for many Western countries. Until the late 20th century, the name Mandarin gradually fell silent, and even no longer appeared in the ears of the world. But the Ten Rings gang he founded has become the world's largest terrorist armed organization. These are all what Carl's learned from the top secret files of the United States. For a moment, he looked at the Mandarin in front of him, and his mentality gradually became unstable. Chapter 113, Reconnection with Kingpin. Looking at Mandarin with a slightly changed expression, Carol's eyes instantly became solemn. Carol's showed enough respect for this famous Oriental devil. However, he did not respectfully call him Mandarin, but still called him Mandarin. Not only for face, but also for the next negotiation. Negotiations are all about momentum. Calling him Mandarin now means that Carol's is inherently inferior to him, and he naturally does not want to. "So it's Mr. Mandarin, then I wonder what you want me to do today." Hearing this, Mandarin raised his eyebrows slightly, without caring about the problem of address, and went straight to the point. "I heard that Mr. Awakens is resolutely implementing the anti-terrorism policy recently. There was a little accident last time, so I plan to invite him to be a guest again, and I hope Mr. Carroll's can provide us with enough information." After the words fell, Carroll's expression suddenly changed, and a burst of anger rose on his face instantly. "I helped you last time, and you have problems yourself. Now you want me to help? Impossible." Looking at Carroll's with an excited face, Mandarin smiled indifferently. "Mr. Carls, I didn't invite you here to discuss with you. I just wanted to inform you. You know, if you do something once, you will do it again. You have no choice. While I'm in a good mood now, you can put forward a small condition. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that what you saw today will not appear in the White House tomorrow. You threaten me." Carl stood up with an angry face. "No, it's not a threat. I'm just reminding you of an established fact," Mandarin said calmly. "Aren't you afraid that I will lose everything?" Carl's eyes were full of madness, as if he might make an extreme choice at any time. Mandarin looked at this scene, and was not moved at all. He even chuckled. "If you don't cooperate, the fish will definitely die, but I don't know if the net will break." Mandarin shrugged indifferently. Looking at his appearance, Carl, who originally wanted to pretend to be crazy, sat down with a dejected look. He wanted Mandarin to be cautious, but Mandarin's words directly broke his psychological defense. They were not like him who had no choice. For Mandarin and others, this was just an action. Success would be the best. If it didn't succeed, they would give up. There was no impact at all. Unlike him, there was no way out, except to go all the way. At this moment, he regretted that he had promised Killian before, and even had someone take a picture of him as evidence. Unfortunately, it was too late to regret now. He had no way back, and no other choice. "I promise you. But you have to help me get to that position." Carl gritted his teeth, and chose to go along with the crowd again. Hearing this, Mandarin smiled. "No problem. It will be more helpful for you to sit in that position." The two officially reached a cooperation, and Carl did not stay for long, and left the club soon. After Cowles disappeared, the bald man who had been standing aside without saying anything whispered, "Sir, do you want to send someone to monitor him?" "No, he is a smart man and knows what to do." Mandarin waved his hand and rejected the bald man's proposal. "Let's go, we should go meet that former partner." Hearing this, the bald man was stunned and then reminded in a low voice, "Sir, Killian is dead." "So what? He hasn't fulfilled what he promised me, and no one can ask me to help him for nothing." When saying this, Mandarin's tone revealed a hint of coldness, which made the bald man shudder all over, and he didn't dare to say anything more. The two left the club, got in the car, and headed towards avant-garde technology, and soon disappeared in the crowd. On the other side, in the beach villa, Tony also received the news that Stark Industries was attacked by an explosion. When he received this news, Tony was stunned for a moment, and then reacted, and a trace of cold murderous intent flashed in his eyes. "Interesting. Have you found out who did it?" Tony asked while looking at Happy, who was reporting. As the head of the security department, Happy broke out in a cold sweat when he heard this. "Sorry, boss. The guy who delivered the bomb to the company covered his face. We didn't find his identity information. I also investigated the courier. Nothing was delivered to our company today. The guy must have pretended to be the courier." Tony glanced at Happy coldly, and his calm eyes made Happy feel a little scared. "You go to the company gate tomorrow and guard the gate. You don't have to follow me." Hearing this, Happy's figure trembled slightly, and his face turned pale quickly. He opened his mouth and wanted to defend himself, but in the end he couldn't say a word. No matter what the reason is, as the head of the security department of Stark Industries, it is his responsibility to protect the company's safety. Now that something like this has happened, he naturally has to take full responsibility. And he believes that, if he opens his mouth to defend himself, the punishment will not only not be reduced, but will be more severe. Therefore, Happy finally lowered his head bitterly and whispered, "I understand, boss." After that, Happy turned around and left the villa. After watching him leave, Tony rubbed his nose with some tiredness. This matter was just a small matter for him, and he didn't care about the casualties. What really made him angry was Happy's laxity. He let a stranger step into the company without any precautions. It was really unforgivable. Of course, Tony didn't abandon him completely. This punishment was just to give him a warning. Shaking his head, and no longer thinking about this matter, Tony took out his mobile phone and dialed a number he hadn't contacted for a long time. "Hello. Tony. It's me. What's the matter? Help me check who did the explosion in my company." "Okay." The person on the other end of the phone agreed to Tony's order without hesitation. It was Kingpin, who hadn't been contacted for a long time. If you ask the most outstanding organization in the United States, most people will first think of the FBI. But if you ask the most outstanding organization in New York, it must be Kingpin, the underground emperor. There was a saying in the underground world of New York that, if you want to kill someone, go to Kingpin, and he will help you solve it perfectly. If you want to find someone, go to Kingpin, and he will tell you where the person is immediately. Chapter 114. Very Deep Memory. Avant-garde technology. Since Killian mysteriously disappeared, Maya has gradually taken control of avant-garde technology with the help of Tony. Although she does not have absolute say in the company like Tony, she has become the leader of avant-garde technology. When Mandarin and his party arrived at avant-garde technology, they visited Maya directly as the senior executives of the security company. Hearing the call from the front desk, Maya was surprised why the senior executives of the security company wanted to see her, but she still received Mandarin and his party in the reception room. Pushing the door open and walking into the reception room, Maya's eyes fell directly on Mandarin and the two. Compared with the image of a female scientist in the past, she is now wearing a black professional suit, black stockings on her feet, and black high heels. The whole person exudes the momentum of a strong woman in the workplace. Looking at Mandarin and the two, Maya's brows frowned instantly. These two people don't look like the senior executives of the security company, and they all exude a dangerous atmosphere. For a time, Maya couldn't help but be alert. "What do you two want to talk to me about?" Maya asked as she sat opposite the two of them. Although she felt that Mandarin and the other two were not good people, they should not dare to do anything in broad daylight, right? Are you Mayor Hansen? Mandarin's hoarse voice sounded, with a dangerous smile on the corner of his mouth. Mayor nodded, a little puzzled. Mandarin, who had confirmed his identity, exuded a terrifying aura at this moment, and said word by word, "I'm Killian's partner. He once promised to provide me with a batch of extremis virus. Now that he is dead, Miss Mayor should not deny it, right?" As soon as these words came out, Mayor's pupils suddenly shrank. Extremis virus is a secret of Pioneer technology. Except for him and Killian, even the other senior executives of the company are not aware of it. And now, a stranger actually revealed the secret of Pioneer technology. This instantly shocked Mayor's heart. "Who are you? How do you know about the extremis virus?" "You can call me Lord Mandarin. I just want to know when my extremis virus will be handed over to me," Mandarin said calmly. Mayor immediately shook her head and refused. "I'm sorry, I don't know you. Since Killian agreed to give it to you, then you can go find him. I have something else to do, and I'm sorry I can't accompany you." After that, Mayor stood up and wanted to leave. Mandarin's cold laughter came from behind. "It seems that Miss Mayor is not going to fulfill her promise. In that case, don't blame me for being rude." After that, Mandarin suddenly raised the middle finger of his right hand, and a gust of wind blew through the conference room, blowing Mayor out directly. Bang! The figure hit the wall heavily, and Mayor was dizzy. "You!" Looking up at Mandarin fiercely, Mayor was about to fight back, but suddenly Mandarin put down his right hand, raised his left hand, and pointed his little finger directly at Mayor. Suddenly, a chill hit Mayor's heart, and a freezing beam instantly fell on her body, gradually freezing her body. Upon noticing this scene, Mayor's expression changed suddenly, and she struggled hard to break free from the ice, but in the end it was useless, and she could only watch herself turn into an ice sculpture. "Take her and go," Mandarin said casually, and the bald man was a little puzzled. "Sir, why do you want to keep this woman? She can make the extremis virus, can you?" Hearing this, the bald man immediately understood, and immediately shut up, then stepped forward to carry the human-shaped ice block, and followed Mandarin out of the meeting room. When the people from Pioneer Technology saw Mayor frozen into an ice block, everyone's face changed instantly. Many people came up to stop him, but they were killed directly by Mandarin activating the magic ring. As a world-famous terrorist, human life is not worth mentioning in his eyes, so he has no intention of showing mercy. As for the matter getting out of hand, he is even less afraid. We have only just begun to investigate. What he will do next will be even bigger than what he has done today. In the end, the two of them rushed out of avant-garde technology, turned avant-garde technology upside down, and then left. 20 minutes later, a large number of sirens sounded under the avant-garde technology building. After listening to the story of the avant-garde technology staff, the New York City Police Department immediately realized that this matter was not something they could intervene in, so they directly transferred the case to SHIELD. Shortly after receiving the news, Nick arrived with SHIELD's people. Originally, this little thing was not worth the dispatch of a big director like him, but the New York Police Department sent the surveillance video in avant-garde technology to SHIELD, allowing SHIELD to figure out Mandarin's identity as soon as possible. Therefore, there was a scene where Nick personally rushed to the scene. "Have you found out what happened?" In the reception room, Nick looked at the traces at the scene, while asking the SHIELD investigators. After the words fell, the investigators directly played a surveillance video on the computer. "Director, I think you should listen to this content." Hearing this, Nick's attention was immediately focused on the video. It's the content of Mandarin asking Mayor for the extremis virus. Listening to the conversation between the two parties, Nick's face gradually became solemn. Combined with the previous kidnapping of aliens, the information in his mind quickly connected, and he immediately realized the shocking truth of the matter. Mandarin was actually involved in the previous kidnapping. Thinking of this, Nick immediately realized that things were not good. Mandarin had sent people to kidnap aliens before, so would the old drama happen again this time? With this idea in mind, Nick immediately lost the idea of continuing the investigation and quickly called on the members of SHIELD to retreat. He must now quickly protect aliens, and must not let the last thing happen again. At the same time, in the beach villa, Tony, who had been waiting for more than an hour, finally received the information sent by Kingpin. As the underground emperor of New York City, it must be said that Kingpin is very efficient. In just 1 hour, he not only found out the explosion of Stark Industries, but also found out the mastermind behind the scenes, Mandarin. Of course, this is also because Mandarin did not hide his identity at all. Otherwise, if he really wanted to hide, Kingpin wouldn't have found out about him so quickly. After reading the information in the mailbox, Tony's eyes suddenly became deep. If Tony still lacked understanding of other characters, then Tony's memory of Mandarin, the enemy of Iron Man, was very deep. After all, the first time he was kidnapped was the work of the Ten Rings gang, and it was hard for Tony to forget it. Chapter 115. Are you qualified to be an enemy? After closing the mailbox, Tony's thoughts quickly turned. Whether it is a superhero or a villain in Marvel, they all have their own pursuits. For example, Norman and Dr. Octopus, one wants to expand his company and the other wants to continue to study his own technology. Although they act crazy, they are all related to their own interests. Only Mandarin is a complete lunatic. Because of his past experiences, he has been obsessed with destroying human civilization and his actions are very crazy. But because of his purpose, Tony can almost predict his next action plan, which should be to continue the unfinished plan before. Kidnap aliens, or kill him. Because he wants to achieve his goal, the US government has always been a huge roadblock. As the head of the United States, whether it is kidnapping aliens, or killing him directly, it will have a huge impact on the United States, and help him clear the obstacles on the road ahead. Therefore, Tony was not in a hurry. He placed the Black Shadow Legion next to aliens. As long as aliens had an accident, he could find him. In this case, why bother to investigate? After sorting out his thoughts, Tony relaxed again. He looked at the waves surging in the dark from the balcony and murmured to himself, "Enemy, I want to see if you are qualified to be my nemesis." After that, Tony fell into complete silence. On the other side, Nick, who returned to SHIELD, summoned Steve and others as soon as possible and sent them to Washington Shield to protect aliens' safety. He was in charge of the overall situation in New York City and continued to search for the traces of Mandarin. After receiving the order, Steve and others went to Washington Shield as soon as possible to protect aliens. With the bodyguard team that doubled around aliens, he was completely surrounded by a copper wall. At the White House, after a day's work, aliens rubbed his nose and walked out of the White House under the escort of the bodyguards. With the lesson from the last time, aliens' recent route home is different every day. Even aliens himself doesn't know which route to take home. Everything is temporarily planned by the top security experts around him, which greatly improves safety. But just as he walked out of the White House, he suddenly heard a call from behind. Carls quickly caught up with aliens and said with a smile on his face, "Sir aliens, wait a minute." Aliens stopped and looked at Carls behind him and said with a smile, "What's the matter, Carls?" "It's like this, I still have some questions about today's topic. I want to discuss it with you. If you don't mind, how about I take a ride?" Carls said very naturally, and aliens and others did not doubt anything. In today's parliament, Carls did disagree with aliens. Now he wanted to talk more with him, and aliens would naturally not refuse. "Of course, no problem. Get in the car. We'll talk in the car." "Okay." After saying that, Carls was added to aliens' team. In a building 1 kilometer away from here, a group of fully armed soldiers were quietly waiting here. Mandarin looked down at the night outside the window, shaking a red wine glass in his hand. The bald man followed him as always. Not far away, a slender man was sitting in front of a computer fiddling with something. He was Norris, who took parts away before. As mentioned before, Mandarin's public identity in the United States is a senior executive of a security company, and Norris is the public president of the security company. Suddenly, a beeping sound came from the computer, and Norris, who had been fiddling with the computer, suddenly smiled. "The fish has taken the bait, sir." After saying that, Mandarin, who was looking at the scenery outside the window, turned around and smiled. "It seems that our partners are more concerned than we thought, and they started to act so quickly. Then should we start the action, sir?" Norris asked respectfully. Mandarin nodded. "Let's act, and make a quick decision." "Yes." Norris nodded. He immediately picked up the phone and began to give orders, and Mandarin turned to look at the bald man and said in a calm tone, "Scorpion, you should go too." "Okay, sir." The bald man called Scorpion nodded respectfully, and then a hideous smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. On the highway, a convoy of 5 bulletproof cars moved forward. In the third car, Orleans and Cowles sat in the back seat and kept talking and exchanging opinions. Looking at Carl's serious face, anyone could tell that he was here to discuss work. Suddenly, a roar came from behind the convoy. Under the cover of darkness, the roar was extremely harsh. Suddenly, a calm voice rang out from the earphones of the bodyguard team around Orleans. "Something is happening. Pay attention to protecting Mr. Orleans." Understood. Soon, a Harley appeared behind the convoy, and a strong man drove a motorcycle and appeared behind the convoy, biting them like a hungry wolf. "Boss, what should we do now? Should we fight back?" a team member asked in the earphone. The captain of the bodyguard team heard this and said calmly as always, "No, speed up and get rid of them." Yes. At this moment, the speed of the convoy increased rapidly, and the distance from the Holly that appeared behind them quickly began to increase. However, before they could completely get rid of the people behind them, suddenly, a bright headlight appeared on the road in front of the convoy. A heavy truck blocked the convoy's way. On the top of the car, a bald man looked at the oncoming convoy with a grim smile on his face. Fully armed soldiers stood on both sides of the truck, completely blocking the way forward. "Not good, Captain, we are surrounded," someone in the bodyguard team exclaimed, and the bodyguard captain saw this, and his face sank. "Prepare for battle." After saying this, the bodyguard captain who was driving turned his head and looked at Orleans and Carls in the back seat and said, "Gentlemen, we have encountered a little trouble. No matter what happens, don't get off the car. I will take care of everything." Hearing this, Orleans and Carls stopped talking. "We know, Mike. Be careful," Orleans instructed. Hearing this, Mike showed a confident smile on his face. "Don't worry, Mr. Orleans, I'm the best soldier, and will definitely take you away from here safely." As he spoke, the convoy had stopped in the middle of the road. The many bodyguards in the cars also got out of the cars and quickly set up a defense line, ready for battle. In the last car, Steve and Banner shook their heads, opened the door and got out. At the front of the convoy, Thor twisted the hammer and walked out of the car without saying a word. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116, Mantis catching a cicada. The solemn atmosphere permeated the highway, and the roar coming from the rear of the convoy was like the drums on the battlefield, stirring everyone's emotions. Scorpion, standing on the top of the heavy truck, looked at the convoy building a defense line, licked his tongue bloodthirstily, and immediately ordered, "Attack." After the words fell, the 10 Rings gang members who had been prepared for a long time did not hesitate. The row of people in the front row carrying rocket launchers instantly pressed the launch button. Boom. An explosive roar sounded, and a row of rockets rushed straight to the convoy with tail flames. Seeing this scene, the faces of the bodyguards who got off the car to build defense changed one after another, but no one panicked. One by one, they quickly hid behind the vehicle. With the previous lessons, this time, Orleans' convoy was modified and upgraded again, not only to defend against bullets, but also to defend against strong explosions such as rockets. As long as they were not hit head on, there would be no danger. But just when everyone was thinking about avoiding this wave of attacks, Thor in the crowd obviously had different ideas from everyone else. Looking at the whistling rockets, he not only had no intention of dodging, but even raised the hammer in his hand. As divine power was poured into it, lightning flashed on the hammer. The next second, the terrifying thunder roared out and hit the rocket in the air heavily, detonating the rocket in advance. Boom. With a loud noise, terrifying fireworks appeared in the air. Everyone looked at this scene in amazement, and for a moment, their eyes looking at Thor were full of surprise and astonishment. They were surprised that there was such a strong man hidden in their own side, and they were astonished that there was such a person with mysterious power in the world. On the heavy truck, Scorpion, who was originally planning to enjoy the explosion, looked at this scene, and the smile on his mouth froze, and the whole person frowned. "It's really unexpected that there is a superhuman," Scorpion said expressionlessly. As the world's largest terrorist organization, he is naturally no stranger to superhumans. It's just that, because the number of superhumans is very small, basically no one will use superhumans as bodyguards. So when he saw Thor showing his strength, he was so shocked. But soon, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth again, and Scorpion snapped his fingers. Swish. In an instant, 3 figures appeared behind him, each of them exuding a cold breath and expressionless. "Go, kill him." Scorpion pointed at Thor. The 3 did not respond, but their figures disappeared instantly. In order to cooperate with Mandarin before, Killian specially provided him with a batch of desperate virus and promised to continue to provide it in the future. It was because of this that the two sides had the opportunity to cooperate. The first batch of desperate virus, a total of 10, failed after injection, and only 4 succeeded. These 3 people are 3 of the 4 successful ones. As for the last one, it was Scorpion standing on the top of the heavy truck. On the opposite side, Thor, who destroyed the rocket, was about to rush into the crowd to kill, but before he could act, he found 3 guys with a cold breath rushing towards him. Seeing this, Thor's expression instantly became serious, and his eyes were full of seriousness. After being beaten again and again, he had completely adjusted his mentality and dared not underestimate anyone. Therefore, before the 3 people approached, Thor swung the Thor's hammer in his hand. Boom. 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 Lightning struck the 3 people directly, and terrifying lightning appeared in the air. But the next second, something happened that shocked him. The 3 guys actually dodged his attack. How is this possible? The speed of lightning is second only to light. How could they dodge it? Looking at the 3 people who dodged the lightning in surprise, Thor was a little unresponsive for a while. When he came to his senses, the 3 people had already rushed in front of him and launched an attack at the same time. Puff. There were bursts of air-breaking sounds, and the 3 people launched an offensive at the same time, bombarding his head, throat, and chest. Thor swung Thor's hammer to fight back and dodge quickly, but the speed of the 3 people was far beyond his expectations. Even with his reaction speed, he could only barely react. Finally, he used Thor's hammer to block the attack on his head and barely avoided the killer move that attacked his throat. But in the end, he was hit in the chest by the last person. Bang! A dull sound echoed in the air. Thor's figure flew backwards, and a mouthful of blood spurted out of his mouth, making his face pale. At the back of the convoy, Steve and Banner, who got off the car, happened to see this scene. At the same time, their expressions changed at the same time. Without hesitation, they quickly rushed to the battlefield. Roar. A roar sounded, and Banner's figure changed rapidly, and in a blink of an eye he turned into the Hulk again. Then he jumped suddenly, stepped out a huge pit in the ground, and his figure was ejected, directly knocking one of the 3 people away. Steve was not idle either. The shield in his hand was thrown out by him as a hidden weapon, directly crossing a distance of hundreds of meters, and knocked away the Extraordinary who was about to chase Thor. With the 2 joining the battlefield, the situation changed again. 3-3, Extraordinary against Extraordinary. In order to avoid the fight between them from affecting the convoy, the 3 of them took the initiative to lead the 3 extraordinary people of the Ten Rings gang away from the convoy and opened up another battlefield in the wilderness nearby. On the heavy truck, Scorpion watched this scene and withdrew his gaze after just one glance and focused his attention on the convoy again. His target was aliens, and nothing else mattered. Kill. The cold words rang out from his mouth. The members of the Ten Rings gang launched another offensive. In the convoy, many bodyguards also quickly began to meet the enemy under the command of the bodyguard Captain Mike. For a while, fierce gunshots rang on the road, mixed with bursts of explosions. Rockets were fired from the Ten Rings gang, as if they were free, bombarding the vehicles. The upgraded vehicles had terrifying defense. They withstood so many bombardments, and except for the first vehicle, that was completely scrapped, the rest of the vehicles were still intact. It was just like a turtle shell. Faced with this stalemate, Scorpion, who had been watching the show, finally couldn't help but take action. Compared with the extraordinary people, ordinary people are like ants on the ground, without much resistance. Even though each of these bodyguards is a world-class master, there is still an insurmountable gap between them and the enhanced extraordinary people. Especially since Scorpion injected the desperate virus, which is not only extremely fast, but also has a very strong regenerative ability. Even if hit by a bullet, it can recover quickly. Therefore, with the cooperation of other members of the Ten Commandments gang, Mike and others blocking was quickly defeated. Chapter 117 Life or Death. Seeing the Scorpion approaching the convoy, Steve and his men on another battlefield suddenly became anxious. Their mission was to protect Orleans. If something happened to Orleans, even if they left all three extraordinary people behind, it would still be an irreparable sin. Suddenly, the three wanted to get rid of their opponents and return to the convoy. But as soon as they revealed this intention, the three extraordinary people who were fighting with them seemed to be crazy, rushing up without any regard, not hesitating to exchange injuries for injuries, and holding them tightly. In addition, these three guys have merged the desperate virus, and each of them has a super regenerative ability. For a while, it was like a piece of oxhide candy, sticking to them tightly. Seeing this, Steve and the other two were also anxious, and a low shout came out of Steve's mouth. A trace of black suddenly emerged from his body, and suddenly, Steve's speed and strength were instantly enhanced. The opponent who was originally evenly matched with him was directly blown away by him. Banner roared like a beast at this moment, and his muscles all over his body swelled up instantly. He punched his opponent. Boom. Suddenly, a big hole was punched in the stomach of Banner's opponent. Seeing the two people explode one after another, Thor was also anxious. He was the god of war in the world of gods, and he didn't want to save face. Thunderbolt. With a loud shout, Thor's hammer in Thor's hand released lightning crazily. The terrifying lightning instantly enveloped Thor's opponent. Thousands of thunders fell down and directly submerged his opponent. However, an accident also happened at this time. Perhaps it was because he hit too hard. Thor's opponent suddenly exploded. Boom. The terrifying firelight emerged and directly swallowed Thor. A piercing scream suddenly sounded. Seeing this, Steve and the other two changed their faces. Thor. The two called out, and the remaining two extraordinary people of the Ten Rings gang looked at each other at this moment, and then quickly rushed towards the two. Their bodies expanded rapidly, and Banner's expression changed drastically when he saw this scene. Captain, retreat. Banner wanted to retreat immediately after the roar, but it was too late. The bodies of the two men exploded completely, and the terrifying flames directly submerged Banner and the others. As the Death Warriors trained by Mandarin, completing the mission is their only goal. As long as they can achieve their goal, they will not hesitate to sacrifice their lives. So, after realizing that they could not stop Steve and the others, the two chose to self-destruct. The terrifying explosion swept through the air, instantly adding fuel to the fire of the supernatural who had exploded before. For a while, in the night, the sky was directly reflected in a fiery red, dazzling and beautiful, but also full of murderous intent. Hearing the movement behind him, Scorpion looked back, and a hint of gloom flashed in his eyes. 3 supernaturals injected with the desperate virus died. This is also a huge loss for the Ten Rings gang, enough to hurt. In addition to Mandarin, only the 4 of them in the Ten Rings gang successfully merged with the desperate virus and evolved into supernaturals. Now that he had lost 3 people in one go, even if he completed the mission this time, he would probably be punished when he returned, so Scorpion was naturally not in a good mood. Fortunately, he knew that the business was more important, so he retracted his gaze after just a glance and came to the outside of the third car. Just as he stood still, a burst of gunfire came from the driver's seat. Bang, bang, bang. Mike was holding a Desert Eagle, and at this moment all the bullets poured into Scorpion's chest. Looking down at the bloody hole on his chest, Scorpion frowned and exerted a little force, and suddenly, the bullet was squeezed out of the muscle directly, and his wound began to heal quickly. After doing all this, Scorpion looked up at Mike, who was in the driver's seat with a desperate face, and suddenly stretched out his right hand, grabbed Mike's neck, and dragged him out of the driver's seat. I hate others to attack me. After saying that, Scorpion used one hand to force and broke Mike's neck. At this point, Orleans' bodyguard team was completely wiped out. In the back seat, Carl swallowed subconsciously while watching this scene. Although he had cooperated with the 10 rings, he didn't dare to speak at this time. What if the 10 rings went crazy and killed him directly? Then he would have no place to cry. He didn't want to bet whether they would care about his partner's identity, so at this moment he behaved very well and didn't even dare to move. After dealing with Mike, Scorpion looked at Oliens and Carl's in the back seat, and a smile appeared on his face. First, he glanced at the expressionless Oliens and confirmed his identity. Then Scorpion focused his attention on Carl's and said with a smile on his face, "Mr. Carls, don't be so nervous. You are our great contributor. I won't do anything to you." As soon as these words came out, Oliens immediately turned his head to look at Carl's beside him. The scene of Carl's calling him before quickly flashed in his mind. Combined with the current scene, he knew that he had been betrayed. Suddenly, a trace of anger flashed in Oliens' eyes, and he wanted to kill Carls on the spot. Carls didn't look at Oliens at this moment, but just looked at Scorpion and smiled awkwardly. "It's all your credit. I just provided a little insignificant help." On the surface, he looked humble, but in fact, Carls had already cursed in his heart. Scorpion didn't reveal it earlier or later, but at this time, it was simply not a good intention. Scorpion naturally heard the reluctance in his words, and a trace of contempt flashed in his eyes. Carls looked nervous just now. Of course, he was scared by himself, but in his opinion, there was a deliberate element in it, and he didn't want to expose his actions. In this way, if there is any accident again, such as the last time, when Oliens returned safely, he can pretend that he knew nothing. Scorpion can't tolerate this kind of jumping around, so he said it just now. Ignoring Carl's ugly face, Scorpion looked at Oliens, whose anger had not yet dissipated, and said playfully, "Mr. Oliens, don't you want to resolutely fight against terrorism? I'm here now. I wonder how you plan to fight," he said in a joking tone. He enjoyed the feeling of stepping on these big men. Hearing this, Oliens snorted coldly, "It's just rats in the sewer. As long as I'm alive, I will definitely resolutely eliminate you rats." His tone was very firm, and there was not much fear. Scorpion couldn't help laughing after hearing it. "It's tough enough, but I don't know if you are so tough in the face of death." With the previous lesson, Mandarin no longer pursued direct kidnapping, so before leaving, he specifically told Scorpion that it didn't matter whether he lived or died. So, when he heard Oliens' words, he immediately wanted to kill him. Chapter 118, The Desperate Trolls make a shining appearance. With murderous intent in his eyes, Scorpion did not hesitate at all. He stretched out his right hand and grabbed Oliens' neck. Judging from his appearance, he did not intend to hold back at all. Once he grabbed him, Oliens would definitely die. Seeing this scene, a trace of fear finally appeared in Oliens' eyes. There is a great terror between life and death. No matter how tough Oliens had been before, when death really came, the instinctive fear still suppressed all reason. Seeing that he was about to die, at this moment, a tall black and red figure suddenly appeared behind Scorpion, and a big hand directly grabbed his neck, pulled it back suddenly, and threw him out in an instant. Bang! He fell heavily to the ground. Scorpion didn't care about the pain on his body, and looked up in astonishment. Suddenly, the black shadow troll fused with the desperate virus appeared in front of him. The body full of oppression, with black and red lines all over his body, and a pair of scowled eyes stared at him without any emotion. Seeing this scene, Scorpion's heart trembled instantly, and a trace of uncontrollable fear rose from the bottom of his heart. "Who are you?" Scorpion said with a vigilant face. The desperate troll naturally did not answer him, but just looked at him quietly, which brought him great pressure. At this moment, the desperate troll, who had been standing quietly in the same place, seemed to have received some kind of order, and his huge figure suddenly moved. He stepped forward, and the next second, the desperate troll appeared directly in front of Scorpion. Seeing this scene, Scorpion's pupils shrank instantly, and he didn't have time to think about it, and the whole person rolled on the ground. Bang! A tremor sounded, and the desperate troll's foot stepped heavily on the ground, where Scorpion fell just now. The ground trembled, and a huge footprint appeared. Seeing this, Scorpion sweated coldly. Fortunately, he dodged quickly, otherwise, if he was stepped on by this foot, he would be seriously injured, even if he didn't die. However, his relief in his heart did not last long. The desperate troll, whose attack missed, launched another attack. The flame pattern on his body lit up, and he opened his mouth, and suddenly, a mouthful of flames rushed straight towards Scorpion. Seeing this, Scorpion's expression condensed, and flames also spurted out of his mouth. For a moment, a sea of fire suddenly burned between the two. The air sizzled under the burning of the flames. Because they were also fused with the desperate virus, the flame attacks of the two could not do anything to each other, and they were deadlocked in midair. However, this stalemate did not last too long. Just when Scorpion was concentrating on dealing with the black shadow troll in front of him, another desperate troll quietly appeared behind him. Bang! A solid punch landed directly on his back. Scorpion, who was concentrating on dealing with the enemy in front of him, did not expect the situation behind him at all. Suddenly, a mouthful of blood spurted out of his mouth, and he fell directly into the attack range of the desperate troll in front of him. The flames instantly burned on his body, and screams came out of his mouth. For a moment, the Scorpion that had just dominated the life and death of others was now beaten to death. In the beach villa, Tony watched this scene through the perspective of the desperate troll, and the corners of his mouth suddenly curled up slightly. The shadow troll that merged with the desperate virus did not disappoint his expectations. Ordinary extraordinary people are no longer their opponents, and it is not in vain that he has spent so much effort on them. Bring the people back. Tony resisted. Suddenly, on the other side, on the battlefield, the two desperate trolls who were about to continue attacking stopped their actions at the same time. Looking at the Scorpion rolling on the ground, one desperate troll went forward and picked him up from the ground like a chicken. The next second, the two desperate trolls sank directly into the ground with the Scorpion and disappeared. The battle between the desperate troll and the Scorpion is a long story, but the two sides fought for more than 10 seconds, and it was over. It was not until the desperate troll merged with the Scorpion into the ground that the people of the scene reacted. The members of the 10 Rings looked at each other in bewilderment. Their leader was taken away, so what should they do? Continue to complete the mission? Or retreat? Everyone looked at each other, and no one had an idea for a while. In the car, Orleans, who had escaped the disaster, was breathing heavily, with a look of fear on his face, and at the same time, he looked at the ground, where the desperate troll and others disappeared in disbelief. As an ordinary person, he really couldn't understand how their huge bodies merged into the ground. However, the shock did not last too long. Soon, he regained his composure and turned to look at Carl's beside him. Under Orleans' cold gaze, Carl's face was full of bitterness. He knew that he had fallen this time, and for a moment, his whole body slumped against the car. At this time, a fight was heard outside the car. It was Steve and others who had been dragged just now who finally got rid of the predicament and returned to the side of the convoy and quickly cleaned up the remaining members of the 10 Rings. Although the 3 of them were seriously injured in the self-explosion of the extraordinary people of the 10 Rings, it was still easy to deal with these ordinary people. Soon, the screams outside the car stopped, and Steve appeared at the door. "Mr. Orleans, are you okay?" Steve asked with concern. Orleans shook his head. "It's okay, thank you for what happened today." Hearing this, Steve couldn't help but smile bitterly. Although they were trapped just now, it didn't mean that they knew nothing about what happened just now. They witnessed the appearance of the extremist troll and took away the Scorpion. It can be said that, if it weren't for the extremist troll's intervention, Orleans would probably have lost his life at this moment, and their mission would naturally fail. Thinking of the terrible consequences, Steve couldn't help but feel relieved. However, he also had a lot of doubts in his heart. The biggest doubt was why the extremist troll appeared here and saved Orleans. Although the appearance of the extremist troll changed a lot, he still recognized them as Tony's shadow core at a glance. After all, the ability to appear and disappear in a mysterious way was only possessed by Tony's shadow core. Thinking of this, Steve glanced at the calm Orleans. He felt that Orleans must know something, but he did not ask too much. Although Orleans was just an ordinary person, he was a person at the pinnacle of power in the United States after all. Even if he asked, as long as he didn't want to talk, he wouldn't get any useful information. In this case, it would be better to keep the doubts in mind and investigate later. "Mr. Orleans, we shouldn't stay here for long. Let's leave first." Steve put away his thoughts and suggested. Hearing this, audience nodded, and the group got into a car and left quickly. Chapter 119. The Dark King does not need enemies. In the beach villa, Tony sat in the living room and waited quietly. Soon, a shadow appeared on the floor of the living room, and the desperate troll rose from the ground holding Scorpion. He threw Scorpion on the ground casually, and Tony thought, and the desperate troll merged into the ground again and disappeared. Tony Stark, Scorpion said weakly, but he could not hide the surprise in his eyes. Do you know me? Tony raised his eyebrows. Hearing this, Scorpion reacted immediately, and lowered his head and said, I just saw you in a magazine. Really? Then who sent the bomb at the door of my company? I don't know. Scorpion quickly shook his head to deny it, as if he had no idea. Seeing his refusal to admit it, Tony was too lazy to continue asking. Anyway, everyone knew the truth of the matter, so there was no need to waste time. Tell me, where is Mandarin? Tony's smile faded, and he spoke slowly. As his smile disappeared, a strong sense of oppression suddenly emanated from him. If the oppressive feeling on the desperate troll is like a mountain, then the oppressive feeling on Tony is like the sea. When it is calm, you don't feel anything, but once he gets serious, he is like a raging ocean, making it impossible for people to resist. I don't know. Scorpion gritted his teeth and said stubbornly. At this time, a mental wave suddenly emanated from Tony's body, and the dazed Scorpion was instantly controlled by Tony. Suddenly, the expression on his face became dull. Where is Mandarin? Tony asked again. This time, Scorpion did not say that he didn't know, but said in a dull tone, at Zark's insecurity. Hearing this, Tony's mind quickly emerged with the information of Zark's insecurity. This is a medium-sized security company headquartered in Huashengshield. Thinking of this, Tony said again, call him. After the words fell, the controlled Scorpion took out the phone on his body. This phone was obviously specially made, so it was not damaged in the previous battle. Taking out the phone, Scorpion skillfully input a string of numbers and dialed it. Beep beep. A waiting tone sounded, and soon the phone was connected, and Mandarin's hoarse voice came from the phone. Is the matter done? After the words fell, the controlled Scorpion naturally had no way to answer. Tony reached out, and took the phone from him, and said with a smile, he can't answer you now. After the words fell, Mandarin on the other end of the phone was silent for a moment. Then, he spoke slowly, who are you? You asked someone to place a bomb at the door of my company, and now you ask who I am? Tony, it turned out to be you. How about it? Do you like the gift I gave you? I like it very much, so I plan to give you a return gift. What do you think of this head called Scorpion? Tony said in a relaxed tone. But the imagined scene of Mandarin getting angry did not appear, and his voice was still too calm. I don't like his head, but if you want to kill him, just kill him. He's just a waste. If he dies, he dies. As soon as these words came out, Tony frowned and had a better understanding of Mandarin. This guy's not a normal person. He doesn't even care about his confidants. By the way, I have a woman here. I don't know if you are interested. Her name seems to be Maya. Mandarin suddenly said. Tony's brows frowned immediately. He really didn't know that Maya fell into Mandarin's hands. Seeing Mandarin threatening him with Maya, Tony sneered disdainfully. Kill her if you want. She is the only one who can make the extremis virus. If you are willing, then kill her. Tony didn't care about Maya. He kept her just to have someone who could make the extremis virus. If Maya was killed, Reed and others could do some research. It's not difficult to make the virus. Therefore, Mandarin's threat didn't matter to him at all. Mandarin was obviously choked by these words, and didn't speak for a while. But Tony was no longer interested in playing charades with him, and said directly, I'll wait for you at Niuiao. If you don't come, I'll kill this guy. Remember to bring Maya in exchange. After that, Tony hung up the phone without caring whether he agreed or not. In the Zonxin security building, listening to the busy tone coming from the phone, Mandarin's eyes suddenly flashed a gloomy color. The phone that was originally held in his hand was instantly broken into pieces as his palm suddenly exerted force. Just like he said on the phone, he didn't care about Scorpion's life or death, but he hated people threatening him. At the moment, a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Wait for me at Niuiao, then I'll go see you. I want to see what tricks you can play. At the same time, in the beach villa, just as Tony hung up the phone, a cold electronic synthesized sound suddenly rang in his mind. Ding, side quest released, the battle of the old enemy. Quest content, kill the old enemy. The King of Darkness does not need old enemies, only slaves. Quest reward, draw a lottery once, open a new category of lottery. Hearing the sudden voice in his mind, Tony's expression was stunned. He had long been accustomed to the system's daily pretending to be dead. In addition to the increase in the number of members of the Dark Alliance, he had never thought that the system would actually issue tasks. For a moment, he became interested. After carefully reading the task description and task rewards, Tony's eyes flashed with anticipation. Open a new category of lottery? What will it be? Demonic energy, mask, or items from another world? Thinking excitedly, Tony's emotions calmed down again after a long time. He originally wanted to kill Mandarin, and now with the system task, his determination to kill Mandarin is even stronger. Looking at the sluggish scorpion in front of him, a burst of flames suddenly appeared in Tony's palm. Throwing it casually, the flames fell directly on him. Bang! In an instant, the flames burned directly. Compared to the flames brought by the extremis virus, Tony's flames are naturally more domineering. In just a few breaths, Scorpion was burned to ashes. Then Tony used telekinesis to control the ashes and directly scattered his ashes into the sea. This guy's role has ended, and there is no point in keeping him. As for exchanging him for mayor, it is even more ridiculous. He never thought of exchanging him from beginning to end. If he is not dead, he will save him. If he dies, he doesn't feel sorry. Therefore, there is no point in keeping Scorpion. SHIELD, Nick's office. He is answering Steve's call at this moment. On the phone, Steve recounted everything that happened in the operation, including Tony's involvement in this matter, and his doubts about Tony in his heart. When Nick heard that Tony was actually involved, his brows frowned instantly. He is now completely afraid of Tony. Even hearing his name gives him a headache. However, Tony actually took the initiative to help aliens, which made him puzzled. Therefore, after hanging up the phone, Nick sat down in his office chair, thinking about Tony's motives and purposes. Chapter 120, Mandarin meets Tony. After thinking for a long time, Nick still couldn't figure out a clue. He could only suppress his doubts temporarily. However, no matter what Tony wanted to do, it was necessary to strengthen his own strength. The death of Venom and Flint had greatly reduced the strength of S.H.I.E.L.D., and now they were short of manpower for some tasks. So Nick didn't stay in the office for long, and drove away from S.H.I.E.L.D. alone, and went to Mariah Hospital. He didn't forget the 3 people he snatched from Tony. Although the 3 had not shown any special features, he had a hunch, after finding out Reed's identity, it was very likely that they were extraordinary people, otherwise Tony would not have made a personal visit. And today was the day they were discharged from the hospital, so he deliberately put down everything and came to pick them up in person. Soon, the car stopped at the door of the hospital, and Nick strode into the hospital. But when he came to the outside of the ward, he noticed a strange atmosphere. All the medical staff avoided this ward one by one, with a hint of fear in their eyes. Seeing this, Nick's heart moved. Is there something wrong? Thinking silently in his heart, Nick's expression suddenly changed, and he quickly walked into the ward. At that moment, the scene in the ward suddenly appeared in front of him. Johnny and Susan sat beside Ben to comfort him. Ben sat on the bed without saying a word, looking at the ceiling with a blank look. Of course, these are not important. What is really surprising is his body at this moment. I saw that his body was like a rock, full of marks from head to toe. Especially his body, which was several times larger than before. Combined with his appearance, he looked like a monster. Seeing this, Nick's eyes suddenly flashed with joy. Others didn't know what was going on, but how could Nick, who had been dealing with extraordinary people for many years, not know? This is awakening. Although he had already expected it in his heart before, when he really saw it, Nick still had a feeling of winning the lottery. Thinking of this, Nick's excited voice suddenly rang out in the ward. Hey, guys, what's wrong with you? You look so sad. Hearing the voice, Johnny and the others came back to their senses. Seeing Nick coming, Johnny and Susan quickly stood up and greeted him. Sir, don't be so reserved. Why do you all look so unhappy? Nick waved his hand and said in a friendly tone. Hearing this, Johnny and Susan glanced at Ben and smiled bitterly. Ben also looked back at Nick at this moment and said in a sad tone, I have become a monster. After he finished speaking, Nick immediately refuted, who said you are a monster? After this, Ben was stunned. Since the gauze was removed this morning, he could feel the disgusted eyes of everyone looking at him. Everyone regarded him as a monster, and Nick was the first one to refute. Nick continued to say, you are not a monster, you just got a power that others don't have. As long as you use this power reasonably, you are not only not a monster, but also a hero of this world. Follow me, I will make you a hero of this world, and then no one can say you are a monster. Nick said sincerely, with a calm look in his eyes. Hearing this, Ben's originally silent heart suddenly beat violently, and a sense of unwillingness rose in his heart. Yes, I'm not a monster. I want to be a hero, and be respected by everyone. Thinking in his heart, Ben's eyes were suddenly full of spirit again. In the original book, he became silent because of his inferiority complex about his appearance. Now, Nick saw through his inferiority complex and helped him break it in advance. I understand, sir. I will definitely clear my name. Ben said in a firm tone. Nick smiled and nodded, and then turned his attention to Johnny and Susan on the side. How is it? Have you changed? Listening to Nick's words, the two originally planned to hide the changes in themselves, but after seeing Nick's attitude towards Ben, Johnny and Susan decided to tell the truth. At that moment, the two of them also performed their own superpowers. One controlled fire, and the other was invisible. Both were very powerful. This made Nick's heart completely happy, and his whole expression became excited. The addition of 3 extraordinary people not only restored the strength of S.H.I.E.L.D. to its peak, but also made it a lot stronger. Without staying in the hospital, Nick picked up the 3 people and left the hospital directly to return to S.H.I.E.L.D. The 3 of them had just awakened not long ago, and they were not proficient in their abilities. They needed more practice. Fortunately, S.H.I.E.L.D. had experience in this area, not only with a large number of training equipment, but also with special guidance. And just when S.H.I.E.L.D's strength was strengthened again, at this moment, Mandarin finally returned to New York. Without going anywhere else, Mandarin, who returned to New York, went straight to Tony's beach villa. No one can provoke him and still be safe. All those who provoke him must pay with blood. For ordinary people, Tony's residence is a secret, but for some people with status, it is not difficult to investigate Tony's residence. Soon, a row of convoys stopped outside the beach villa. Inside the villa, just as Mandarin and others arrived, Tony also received a reminder from Jarvis. Sir, someone is coming. It seems that the visitor is not friendly. Do you need to make a defensive warning? No. Tony stopped Jarvis's idea of calling the police and walked out of the villa alone. Because of the system task, Tony, who originally planned to let a group of people beat Mandarin, gave up this idea and planned to deal with him personally. Pushing open the gate of the villa and walking out, passing through the courtyard outside the villa. Soon, Mandarin and his group appeared in Tony's sight. Similarly, Tony's figure also appeared in front of Mandarin. Looking at Tony, who was walking slowly, Mandarin looked up and down with cold eyes, his eyes full of scrutiny. As if curious, where did he get the courage to provoke himself? But after watching for a long time, Tony looked just an ordinary person except for his extraordinary demeanor. For a moment, Mandarin's eyebrows could not help but slightly raised. Soon, Tony walked out of the gate of the villa and stood in front of everyone. Looking at Mandarin, who exuded a gloomy temperament, Tony folded his hands and took the initiative to speak. Did you bring Mayor? After speaking, Mandarin turned his head and glanced at Norris beside him. Immediately, Norris quickly asked someone to bring a woman down from the car. It was Mayor. Where is my person? Mandarin asked. Although he didn't care, since it was an exchange, he had to check whether the person was right or not. Oh, I killed him. Tony didn't hide it and spoke directly. As soon as this was said, the atmosphere at the scene suddenly fell into a dead silence. Chapter 121 Without the ring, I'm worse than a dog. Ha ha ha. Mandarin laughed hoarsely, and his eyes became colder. No one could provoke him again and again. No one could. Interesting. I haven't met someone as interesting as you for a long time. Have you thought about how to die? I can give you a chance to choose. Mandarin's voice sounded slowly, and for a while, only his voice echoed around the empty villa. Tony raised his eyebrows and said with a smile on his face, I have a strong life, and even God can't take it away. If you have the ability, then come on. As he said that, Tony spread his hands, full of provocation. Hearing this, Mandarin stopped talking and raised his hand directly. The ring on his left index finger lit up, and a red beam of light instantly burst out from his index finger. At the same time, Tony's eyes lit up, and 2 beams of light also blasted out from his eyes. Boom. A violent explosion sounded. The energy beams fired by the 2 people collided fiercely in midair. The violent explosion flooded the space and separated the 2 people. Seeing this scene, Mandarin's expression changed, and the ring on his left ring finger lit up instantly. Suddenly, his spirit was greatly amplified, and a mental storm rushed directly to Tony's position. Ordinary people, facing the mental attack of invisible substances, will inevitably be hit, but Tony, who has integrated the sheep spell, has also reached a terrifying level of spirituality. Therefore, when Mandarin's mental attack approached Tony, Tony immediately sensed it. At that moment, Tony's mind moved, and his powerful mental power immediately hit him head on. Bang! A silent collision sounded, and blood suddenly flowed from Mandarin's mouth and nose on the other side. Mental confrontation is the most dangerous. He didn't expect Tony to be proficient in the way of spirit. He was caught off guard and suffered a lot. But Mandarin is also a ruthless person. He endured the pain in his mind and continued to activate the skills on the ring. Cutting beams, black body rays, lightning storms, flame explosions, and the skills on the 10 rings were continuously activated by him. Terrifying explosions continued to sound. After a short fight, a huge pit appeared where the 2 men fought. As for Norris and others, they had already retreated far away when the 2 men started fighting. This level of battle was not something they could intervene in. It was even difficult to get close. On the battlefield, Tony used the mental barrier to block Mandarin's skills again, and his eyes turned serious when he looked at Mandarin. This guy was quite strong, which made him feel a little bit annoyed. The main reason was that he had too many skills, which made him a little overwhelmed. However, although Mandarin's strength was not bad, his weaknesses were relatively obvious. He completely relied on the 10 rings on his hands. If he didn't have the rings, his own strength would not be worth mentioning at all. So, soon, Tony had an action plan in his mind. Seeing Mandarin launching his skills again, Tony suddenly moved and disappeared from Mandarin's sight in an instant. Seeing this, Mandarin became alert instantly, but before he could be prepared, Tony appeared directly in front of him the next second. You. Looking at Tony in shock, Mandarin was about to speak, but Tony smiled at him, and the next second, he grabbed his hand. Seeing this, he knew what Tony wanted to do, so he clenched his fists instantly. But he obviously underestimated Tony's strength. Tony, who had merged with the bull spell, was incredibly strong, and he was not able to resist at all. Therefore, with a sharp pain in his fingers, the 2 rings on his right hand were pulled off alive by Tony. Asshole, give me back the rings. Mandarin roared in shock and anger, and at the same time, raised his hand to launch an ice storm, trying to freeze Tony. But Tony's body suddenly burned with flames, which directly dispelled the ice and quickly distanced himself from him. Tony stopped and looked at the 2 rings on his hand, with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. He immediately put the 2 rings on his hands, wanting to feel some of the power of the rings. But, apart from a burst of coldness, Tony did not feel the special power of the rings, and frowned immediately. Mandarin looked at his movements and immediately mocked him. Don't dream. No one else can use the magic ring except me. After saying that, Tony looked up at him with a smile on his face. Really? I don't think so. I don't believe it can't be used, even if I kill you. After saying that, Tony's figure disappeared again. With the lesson learned from the first time, Mandarin released various lasers to bombard the surrounding air almost the moment Tony disappeared, trying to use this method to prevent Tony from getting close. But unfortunately, his reaction speed could not keep up with Tony. When he released the skill, Tony did not get close at all, but when the skill ended, Tony appeared in front of him and continued to violently snatch the ring, which was a completely rogue method. Soon, 3 more rings fell into Tony's hands. Mandarin's 10 fingers that were originally full of rings only had 2 on his left hand and 3 on his right hand. Mandarin was furious, but he could do nothing about Tony. Even a trace of fear grew in his heart. He was able to stay high and mighty because of the magic ring on his hand. Once the magic ring was taken away, he would be finished. Thinking of this, Mandarin suddenly felt like retreating. He looked at Tony angrily and turned around and left. Not far away, Tony watched this scene with a hint of mockery on his face. You come and go as you please. Do you think I'm a clay sculpture? As soon as he finished speaking, Tony disappeared again. The power of the rabbit spell was exerted to the extreme by him. The speed of the whole person was comparable to that of light. Mandarin took only 2 steps and Tony appeared in front of him again. He subconsciously clenched his fists and tightly protected the ring on his hand. But this time Tony did not snatch the ring again and punched him in the face directly. Boom. Mandarin was completely caught off guard and was blown away by Tony's punch. He fell heavily to the ground. Just as he was about to struggle to stand up, Tony appeared beside him again and stepped on his chest. Crack. A bone-breaking sound was heard. Tony showed no mercy and broke his sternum with 1 foot. Cough. A violent cough came from Mandarin's mouth, and a lot of blood seeped out of his mouth and nose. Staring at Tony with his eyes, Mandarin's eyes were full of resentment and unwillingness. He opened his mouth to say something, but his mouth was full of blood, so he couldn't say a word, and finally he could only make a gurgling sound. Chapter 122, Curse Blue's Evil Energy. Seeing that Mandarin was breathing more than he was breathing out, Tony took off the remaining 5 rings on his hand, while he was staring at him. Then he said in a relaxed tone, "It's hard to live with your appearance. Let me take you on your last journey." After that, Tony raised his foot, and the anger in Mandarin's eyes was quickly replaced by fear. In the past, such a look would only appear on his prey. He never thought that one day he would show such a look. It can only be said that good things come to those who love him. Bang! Without any surprise, Tony directly stepped on Mandarin's chest and crushed it. Seeing that the life spirit in his eyes completely dissipated, Tony turned to look at Norris and others not far away. They witnessed the scene of Mandarin's death with their own eyes, and everyone's face was full of fear for a while. In the past, Mandarin was a god in their eyes, and there was nothing he couldn't do, but now that the god is dead, the god slayer still looks at them, and suddenly, everyone turned around and ran away in fear. Tony naturally had no desire to personally deal with these small fish, but with a thought, the shadow army suddenly appeared in front of Tony. Don't leave anyone alive. After saying this, the shadow army jumped and caught up with Norris and others, setting off a killing spree. Leaving the rest to the shadow army, Tony turned and walked towards Maya. As Tony approached, Maya suddenly became nervous. She knew that Tony was very strong. Before, she and Killian were not Tony's opponents, but Tony's battle with Mandarin just now still overturned her cognition. The two were like gods, with endless means, and they could burst out with great power when they raised their hands and feet. Such strength made her feel like she was looking at a god walking in the world when she faced Tony, and she could no longer treat him with a normal heart. "Mr. Tony." Maya lowered her head and used honorifics. Looking at Maya's bound hands, Tony raised his hand and made a stroke, and an invisible force immediately cut the rope on her hands. "Pay attention to your safety in the future. You are not always so lucky to be saved," Tony said calmly. Maya nodded immediately. "I understand, Mr. Tony. Go back and continue to produce the desperate virus." After saying that, Tony turned and walked towards the villa. But just as he turned around, Maya's voice suddenly came from behind him. "Mr. Tony, do you need to rest? I have learned some massage techniques and can help you relax," Maya said with a ruddy face. Seeing Tony turned his head to look at her, she couldn't help but lower her head. Seeing this, Tony's mouth corner suddenly revealed a playful smile. As a seeking, how could Tony not understand the meaning of her words? He looked up and down at her. Although there was some dust on her face that made her look a little embarrassed, but it was still difficult to hide her beautiful face and curvy figure, especially the peak on her chest. It was simply towering into the clouds. "Okay, come on." Nodding, Tony continued to walk towards the villa, and Maya quickly followed after getting her consent, and walked into the villa together. As for the corpse outside the villa, Tony didn't need to worry about it. The Shadow Core would naturally clean up the battlefield. Dragging the corpse into the Shadow Kingdom would be devoured by dark creatures in minutes, which can be said to be very convenient. On the second floor of the villa, in the room, Maya was taking a shower in the bathroom, and Tony changed into her pajamas and sat on the bed, checking the system information. Mission: Battle of the Nemesis. Mission progress completed. Mission reward: draw once, open a new category of lottery. After he killed Mandarin, the mission was prompted to be completed, but he didn't have time to pay attention to it at the time. Now that he was free, he was in the mood to check the mission information. There was nothing much to say about the lottery. He had drawn more than once, and what interested him was the opening of a new category. I don't know what kind of items the system will open this time. While thinking, he opened the lottery roulette. Unlike before, he saw that there was one more option on the lottery roulette. One of them is naturally the spell roulette, which specializes in producing spells, and the other category is the magic energy roulette, which is a newly opened category. Tony's eyes lit up when he saw this scene. The magic energy comes from the devil, and is the original power of the devil. By integrating the magic energy, one can gain the power of the devil, which immediately made Tony excited. Looking at the number of draws that can only be done once, Tony's eyes turned back and forth between the spell roulette and the magic energy roulette for several rounds, and finally chose the magic energy roulette. Start. He silently said in his heart, and suddenly, the pointer on the magic energy roulette started to spin quickly. After feeling that it was about right, Tony started to stop. At that moment, the speed of the pointer began to slow down and gradually fixed on a lotus flower. Suddenly, the lotus flower flew out of the roulette, shot towards Tony, and instantly merged into his body. At that moment, a mighty force washed over his body, making his body stronger, and at the same time, Tony also felt that he had gained more power. Tony opened his eyes and looked at the water cup on the table not far away. He suddenly raised his hand and grabbed it. Suddenly, the water cup seemed to be pulled by an inexplicable force and flew into his hand in an instant. Seeing this, Tony's mouth was full of smiles. The lotus represents the moon demon Xylan, and the power of Xylan is to control gravity. As one of the four basic forces, gravity is everywhere, and wherever there is gravity, it is Tony's home court. Even, Tony can fully control gravity to the extent of Xylan in the anime, and move the trajectory of the moon. In this way, how can Tony not be happy? It can be said that the magic of Xylan alone has made his strength leap up a big step. It is unimaginable how strong he will be when he gathers the 8 magic energies and the 12 spells in one body. Just when Tony was imagining, the bathroom door suddenly opened, and Maya came out wrapped in a bathrobe. Because she had just taken a bath, a trace of heat rose from her body, and her cheeks became rosy, like a red apple, making people want to take a bite. Seeing the beauty emerging from the water, Tony was not polite and directly used the gravity he had just obtained to pull Maya over. In the underground laboratory, Loki listened to the strange sound again and sighed helplessly. He felt that he needed to change a place to do research. Who could stand doing it every day like this? Shaking his head, Loki used his power to block the inexplicable sound and continued to study his own things. It's almost done. Soon, my research will be completed. As he spoke, a hint of excitement flashed across Loki's eyes and face. In the eyes of others, he was studying artificial intelligence, but only he knew that he was studying life, a life that came into being from nothing. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 123, The Particle Reality Gem. Just when the matter of Mandarin came to an end, at this moment, in another country far away from the United States, Eagle Country, Jane Foster discovered a time-space distorted force field in an abandoned building. As an astrophysicist, Jane was full of curiosity about all mysterious powers, so she immediately stepped into the abandoned building. And just after she stepped into this mysterious force field, she didn't know that she had instantly left the earth and appeared in the underground of the Asa God realm. the underground of the god realm was dim, and soon, a pool of dark red transparent solid appeared in Jane's sight, as beautiful as agate crystal. Looking at this scene, Jane subconsciously reached out and touched it, but just when her hand touched the dark red transparent solid, something unexpected happened, and the dark red transparent solid actually merged into her body. A strong shock hit her heart, and Jane fainted almost without resistance. Soon, the dark red transparent solid was completely integrated into her body, and the mysterious force field disappeared. Suddenly, Jane returned to the earth from the god realm. After being found fainted by the assistant, she was directly sent to the hospital, and just after the dark red solid disappeared, Heimdall, the guardian of Asgard, instantly felt something. He is the guardian god of the god's domain, responsible for guarding the Rainbow Bridge, and controlling the portal of the god's domain. At the same time, he was also given a responsibility by Odin to guard the Reality Stone, one of the Infinity Stones. With Heimdall's eyes, that can perceive everything, he can see everything and hear everything, similar to the combination of the clairvoyance and the wind hearing ear in Eastern mythology. But just now he discovered that the ether particles transformed by the Reality Stone disappeared. Suddenly, the expression on Heimdall's face changed instantly. What's going on? Disappeared? Heimdall's face was full of doubts, and his figure flashed and disappeared in an instant. When he appeared again, he had appeared in the place where the ether particles were sealed. Looking at the empty underground palace, Heimdall's face suddenly became extremely ugly. A force of perception, with him as the center, quickly spread in all directions. 100,000 miles, 1 million miles, and 10 million miles. The perception continued to spread, covering the vast territory of the god's domain. But even so, he did not find any trace of the ether particles, as if they disappeared out of thin air. For a moment, Heimdall was shocked and angry, and at the same time, he was wondering who had the ability to steal the ether particles into his nose. Unfortunately, after thinking for a long time, he had no clue, but the ether particles were of great importance. Since he couldn't find them, he could only tell the god King Odin about it. After sorting out the clues, Heimdall did not delay, and his figure quickly disappeared in the underground palace, and went to the Asgard where Odin lived. As the ruler of the god's domain, Odin's residence, the vastness of Asgard far exceeded the imagination of the world. Large tracts of palaces stretched across the sky, and the golden afterglow illuminated the Asgard, filling it with a warm and peaceful atmosphere. When Heimdall saw Odin in Asgard, a guilty look suddenly appeared on his face. "King, I have done a bad job, please punish me." The other particles in the underground palace disappeared. As soon as these words came out, Odin, who was sitting high on the throne, was shrouded in glory and his specific figure could not be seen, and a surprised voice suddenly rang out. "The other particles disappeared? Even you didn't notice it?" Odin's tone was a little curious. Although he was the king of the gods, when it came to perception, even he was not as good as Heimdall. Otherwise, he would not have appointed Heimdall as the guardian god. He just wanted him to use his powerful perception ability to protect the realm of the gods. Heimdall felt even more ashamed after listening to Odin's words, but he did not defend himself, but bowed his head again and asked for punishment. "Please punish me, king." After the words fell, Odin immediately waved his hand. "This matter is not your fault. Even your perception ability can be concealed. This matter may not be simple. Let me make a calculation." After speaking, Odin fell into silence, and Heimdall was also waiting quietly below, without saying a word to interrupt. As the king of gods, Odin is not only powerful, but also one of the top powers in the universe. He is also proficient in various abilities, including the art of calculation. Unless there is special defense or absolute strength, there is no way to resist Odin's calculation. Soon, a terrifying energy fluctuation permeated the Asgard. Heimdall, who was standing below, felt this vast power, and looked at Odin on the throne with more awe. The strong energy fluctuation came quickly and went quickly. Soon, Odin stopped and gave an answer at the same time. "According to my calculation, the other particles are no longer in the god's domain, but in the blue star." After the words fell, Heimdall's face suddenly showed joy. As the guardian god, the combination of the wind hearing and the clairvoyant, as long as there is a target, he can find things at the fastest speed. So, just after Odin's voice fell, Heimdall moved instantly. Infinite divine light bloomed in his eyes, and his eyes passed through layers of space and the endless vacuum universe, and fell directly on the blue star. For a time, most people on the blue star appeared in his eyes. But unfortunately, he did not find any trace of the other particles. Seeing this, the ray of hope that had just risen in Heimdall's heart was immediately extinguished like a flame. Heimdall looked at Odin on the throne in astonishment, and couldn't help asking, "Did you make a mistake?" But he knew that Odin's divine power was infinite, and it was basically impossible for him to make a mistake. So when the word came to his lips, he didn't know what to say. However, Odin on the throne saw through Heimdall's thoughts at a glance, and said in a calm tone, "I can't make a mistake. You didn't find it. It should be, because you are too far away, and the other particles actively blocked your perception. Unless you are on the same planet. Otherwise, across the vast starry sky, as long as it has a heart, you naturally can't find anything." Listening to Odin's explanation, Heimdall showed a trace of sudden enlightenment on his face, and patted his chest and said, "Don't worry, my king, I will go to the blue planet, and bring back the other particles." After the words fell, Odin, who was sitting on the throne, did not agree. "I remember Thor seemed to be staying on Blue Star." Yes. Heimdall took the initiative to speak. "In that case, let him take care of this matter. Let him find the person who stole the other particles as soon as possible and send them to the divine realm." Hearing this arrangement, Heimdall was a little disappointed because he couldn't go there in person. But he also knew that such things must be done as soon as possible. Otherwise, if it is delayed for too long, no one knows whether new changes will occur. Chapter 124. Odin's consciousness arrives. Shield. Training room. Thor was sitting cross-legged in the training room meditating constantly. As a god, divine power is his source of power. The amount of divine power determines the lower limit of his combat power, while the artifacts and divine skills determine the upper limit of his combat power. Since realizing that his own strength is insufficient, Thor has been working hard, meditating constantly in his spare time, to increase his divine power. There is a saying that you have to work hard quietly and then surprise everyone. Obviously, Thor belongs to this kind of person. It's a pity that improving strength is not something that can be done overnight. Although he works hard enough, it is impossible for his strength to suddenly increase. What's more, because of Tony, he did not capture Loki back to the god's domain, nor did he participate in the Battle of the Nine Kingdoms to quell the rebellion. He lacked a period of experience, and his current strength may be slightly weaker than the original. And just when he was immersed in meditation, suddenly, a light shone in his mind, and a figure full of light suddenly appeared in Thor's mind. The man exuded a sacred and unpredictable aura, and every move was full of divine power. Suddenly, Thor's face changed, and the whole person quickly bowed his head respectfully and said, "Father." "Thor, long time no see." Odin sent a divine thought to inform Thor. "How is your mission completed? How is Loki now?" Odin did not directly explain the mission, but first asked about the previous mission. Hearing this, Thor's face suddenly showed a trace of shame. "Sorry, father, I haven't caught Loki yet, and his strength has become stronger. So, the mission is not yet completed," Thor said with a guilty conscience, and there was some helplessness in his tone. He didn't expect that, after seeing Loki again, his strength would be so much stronger. In addition, the strength of Shield was not as strong as in the original book, and Tony was still on Loki's side, which led to his complete failure of his mission. Hearing this, Odin was silent for a while, as if he didn't expect the ending of the matter to be like this. Fortunately, he had a good mentality, and did not blame Thor. After all, both of them were his sons, and it was normal for one to lose to the other. He could not take sides directly, so he could only encourage him. "Thor, don't be discouraged. Explore your own strength. Sooner or later, you will be able to defeat Loki." "Yes, father." Thor nodded, and the whole person became full of fighting spirit again. At this time, Odin finally talked about the main business of this trip. "Thor, there is something you need to do now. The sealed object of the god's realm has disappeared. According to my calculations, it is now on the blue star. You must find it, or its host, and bring it back to the god's realm. This matter is very important, and must be completed as soon as possible." Odin said it very seriously, and his tone was also very serious. Although Thor was not very clear about what happened, he felt a sense of solemnity from his words. At that moment, Thor nodded heavily and took this matter to heart. I understand, Father. I will find it quickly and send it back to the god's domain as soon as possible. After that, the father and son communicated for a while, and finally, Odin's divine thoughts dissipated in Thor's mind. As Odin left, Thor opened his eyes. For the time being, Thor had no clue about finding the sealed object in the god's domain. Although Odin told him some characteristics of weather particles and the reaction after fusion with the population of Blue Star, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack to find someone according to the characteristics in the vast sea of people. If Thor was alone, he really didn't have the confidence to complete this task. Fortunately, he has never been alone, and SHIELD is standing behind him. As the most powerful agency in the United States, SHIELD was established in the last century. Up to now, it has already built its own intelligence network around the world. With their power, it is much easier to find a person in the vast sea of people than Thor himself. So, after opening his eyes, Thor left the training room directly and walked towards Nick's office. Dang dang dang. The door was knocked, and Nick's voice came from the office. Come in. Thor pushed the door open and walked in. Seeing him, Nick behind the desk smiled. Thor, why are you here? I was planning to look for you. Thor was stunned when he heard this. Looking for me? What's the matter? Jane Foster is in trouble, Nick said calmly. Thor's face changed immediately. If anyone on Blue Star is the most important to him, it must be Jane. When he heard that she was in trouble, a strong momentum instantly emanated from Thor. Seeing this, Nick's eyelids twitched fiercely, and he quickly said, don't be excited, Thor. Jean is fine now. She just fainted suddenly before, and was sent to the hospital. She's awake now and out of danger. Hearing this, Thor's originally excited mood calmed down a lot, but after calming down, Thor looked at Nick and frowned. Jane and S.H.I.E.L.D. have no intersection. How did Nick know that she was in trouble? Seeing the suspicion on Sol's face, Nick, who was a shrewd man, knew what he was thinking, and continued to explain. Don't get me wrong, I'm not monitoring her, I'm protecting her safety. After all, you've been in contact with her, and many people know it. I'm also afraid that someone will use the relationship between you and her to threaten you, so I specially asked someone to protect her. If you think it's inappropriate, then I'll have someone evacuate now, Nick said frankly, without a trace of guilt in his eyes, which showed that what he said was true. Seeing this scene, Sol's face gradually relaxed. It's okay, continue to protect her. Where is she now? I'll go see her. Hearing this, Nick gave the address, and then said, tell me, what do you want to talk to me about? How do you know I want to talk to you about something? Sol was a little surprised. Nick's mouth suddenly curled up into a smile. You guys, you don't come to my office for no reason. Unless there is something, no one has ever come to my office to look for me. Okay. Sol scratched his head. Then, he quickly told Nick what Odin had ordered and asked Nick to use SHIELD's intelligence network to help him find it. Nick naturally had no objection to Thor's request. Not to mention that Thor had been working for SHIELD for free during this period. Even if he had no credit, he had worked hard. Even considering Thor's status as the Prince of the Asgard, Nick would try his best to build a good relationship with him. Therefore, facing his request, Nick naturally would not shirk. After he agreed to this, the relationship between the two of them suddenly became much closer. However, because he was worried about Jane, Thor did not stay for too long and left Nick's office after he finished talking. Chapter 125 Thor asks Loki for help. Eagle Country, take turns to squat at the airport. A plane from the United States landed rapidly, and a tall young man followed the crowd to get off the plane. Thor, who already knew Jane's exact location, took a taxi and went straight to the hospital after leaving the airport. Soon, at the door of the hospital ward, Thor took a deep breath with some nervousness, hesitated for a long time, and finally pushed the door and walked in. In the ward, Jane was recuperating on the bed, and the female assistant was taking care of her. When she saw Thor coming in, the female assistant was stunned for a moment, and subconsciously stood up to stop him. Who are you? After the words fell, Jane opened her eyes on the bed. When she saw the face she had been thinking about day and night, Jane suddenly trembled, and 2 lines of tears flowed down. Since Thor returned to the god's domain last time, the two sides have not seen each other again, and when Thor came again, he was busy with supernatural events due to complicated affairs, and did not meet Jane. Now seeing each other again, Jane felt excited and blamed. For a while, the atmosphere in the ward became weird. The female assistant obviously noticed this. Apart from saying a few words at the beginning, she completely curled up in the corner to reduce her presence. She silently said in her heart, "Can't see me, can't see me, just eat melons silently." Complaining, quarreling, explaining, the attitude of ordinary couples in conflict, was repeated on the two of them. Although the plot was cliché, the female assistant, as a melon eater, enjoyed it with relish. After the two of them reconciled, there was a knock on the door and 2 police officers walked in. "Hello, is this Jane Foster's ward? We received a call from someone saying that you were attacked and unconscious, so we came to investigate and take a record." After the words fell, Jane frowned and immediately turned to look at the female assistant on the side. Under her gaze, the female assistant shrank her head. "I called the police. When I saw you unconscious, I was so nervous that I called the police." Hearing this, Jane couldn't help but smile bitterly. The female assistant was doing it for her own good. In this case, she couldn't say anything to blame. At that moment, she could only say to the 2 police officers, "I'm Jane Foster. I was not attacked. I just accidentally fell and fainted. Please come here in person." Jane explained that she did not tell the truth. She was very curious about that place and planned to explore it after being discharged from the hospital. If she told the truth, the place might be blocked, which was not what she wanted to see. Hearing this, the 2 police officers looked at each other and shrugged helplessly. Although they were a little helpless, since the parties said that everything was fine, they could only return the same way. However, as a punishment for making a false alarm, the female assistant was fined €1,000. After sending the 2 police officers away, Sol, who had been silent beside him, immediately sat down by the bed and reached out to grab Jane's small hand outside the quilt, intending to express his feelings in this way. But just when his palm was about to touch Jane, a dark red light suddenly flashed on Jane's body, and Sol's palm was bounced away. Seeing this scene, not only Thor was stunned, but even Jane's expression became sluggish. The female assistant looked at this scene with a shocked face and stammered, "Oh my god. What's going on?" The female assistant's words did not attract the attention of the two. At this moment, Thor and Jane were both lost in thought. Jane was thinking about what was going on. Her memory kept going back and soon locked on the dark red substance she had touched. At this moment, Thor had only one word in his heart, MMP, and he didn't know whether to say it or not. Is it such a coincidence that his father asked him to find the seal, and he found traces of the seal on his girlfriend? The dark red light just now was exactly the same as the characteristics of the seal described by Odin. Thinking of this, Thor looked at Jane, took a deep breath and said, "Jane, you have to tell me honestly what happened. This matter is very important and related to your life. You must tell the truth." Looking at Thor's solemn face, Jane also realized the seriousness of the matter. At the moment, she told everything she had experienced in a nervous tone without hiding anything. After hearing this, Thor had a bigger headache. Therefore, he did not find any useful information from Jane's words. But he also knew that it was not Jane's fault. After all, she was just an ordinary mortal. Rest well first. The things on you are not simple. Don't tell others. Wait for me to help you deal with it. After saying that, Thor did not mention this matter again, and just kept chatting with Jane until Jane fell asleep. Then he walked out of the ward, standing at the window at the end of the corridor with a trace of confusion in his eyes. If someone else had merged the seal of the god's realm, he would definitely take the person back to the god's realm without saying a word. But it turned out that it was Jane who merged the seal, so he couldn't be so careless. After all, no one knew how Odin would deal with Jane, which made him dare not even ask Odin rashly. Otherwise what would he do if Odin asked him to take the person back directly? And just leaving it alone would not work, because he did not understand the seal, nor did he know the harm of the seal. Of course, he could also take a gamble, betting that the seal was harmless and could even bring benefits to people, but he obviously couldn't afford it. After all, Jane was the most important person to him on Blue Star. Therefore, he must find someone who has nothing to do with Odin, but knows about the seal, and learn about it, before he can decide what to do next. And on Blue Star, he can only think of one such person, and that is Loki. Compared to him, a war maniac, Loki knows more about some other knowledge than him. Although the relationship between the two is not very good, for Jane, he is willing to bow his head. After making a decision in his heart, Thor found the female assistant, told her that he had something to deal with, and asked her to take good care of Jane, and then flew back to the United States overnight. The girl went to the airport, got off the plane, and Thor took a taxi directly to Liberty City. S.H.I.E.L.D. has always been concerned about Loki's movements, and knows that he and Tony are together. It's just that because of fear, S.H.I.E.L.D. has always pretended not to know. When he came to the beach villa, Tony was reminded by Jarvis in the villa. "Sir, there are guests." After the words fell, Tony raised his eyebrows. He hadn't had any guests here for a while. Who would come to him at this time? As Tony thought about it, he said, "Jarvis, open the door and invite someone in." "Yes, sir," Jarvis responded, and immediately, Thor just walked to the door of the villa. Before he could knock on the door of the villa opened, and Jarvis' voice rang out instantly. "Sir, please come in." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.